Welcome back to Travolting Presents Easy Ryders. Hosted by Jeff Sweeney and Stuart Elmore. Covering BRAM STOKER'S Dracula with special guest Cole Bradley.
Dear Diary, Episode 11, Easy Riders. As I march through the Valley of Death towards Count Dracula, into his castle of evil and mischief, I'm faced with an overwhelming sense of dread about what might come. What might my future be? What could possibly be waiting me behind those ironclad doors? Could it be recurring guest Cole Bradley returning? Could it be a vampiric nightmare of gothic proportion? I had no idea. The only thing I knew is that my dear love, Becca Johnson, would not be present in the carriage with me, for she was out on a shopping trip. That's right, folks. We're talking about BRAM STOKER'S Dracula today.
It's too early.
Jeff, I just want to say, it's why the board pays for itself.
I really don't know how we follow that up.
Can I ask you guys something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you still do the thing where you switch up the theme music every break in the filmography?
We
Okay.
only break it up for the individual shows.
Okay. But
Yeah.
not like with Travolta where there was 3 different Travolta
Yeah,
themes.
we did that for Travolting, and then we just... It was too
just
much to ask
exhausting
Michael.
to
Well,
ask
this is what I was going to say was, have you at all considered making the middle stretch of Winona by Drop 19s?
No.
Because it times out right.
It would be a bit of a copyright infringement.
Oh, but you're not making money off this.
Not yet.
Except for the one episode where we play the entirety of Geordie's It's Christmas, Say Noel.
Yeah, that's true.
Much to my own co-host's consternation, I am philosophically opposed to putting advertisements on a podcast.
Yeah.
But when I was uploading a recent episode of mine, I did kind of idly just click over to the monetization tab of the hosting service I use.
Yeah.
Just to see what the
Yeah.
numbers
Is that
were.
RSS?
No, it's Acast.
Oh, okay, gotcha,
Because it's free. But it was 2,000 monthly listeners, and I was like, well, that's not happening for a fucking while.
That's the YouTube, because whenever I'm on, because I handle all the YouTube uploads, which is why they're infrequent and sometimes posted on the wrong days for the listeners of YouTube.
Oh my god!
If you listen to podcasts on YouTube, you probably need to be made like the ward of a state, or put under a conservatorship or something.
In 2012, I can understand, but in 2024, it's not a thing anymore.
It's the most convoluted service to use because I go in and I have to list it as a podcast, which makes it so you can listen to it with the app closed.
Annoying. Can you? It is also my firm belief that Spotify and YouTube are non-viable podcast hosting services because I do think intrinsically to it being a podcast as opposed to just a spoken audio show, it has to be downloadable off an RSS.
Mm-hmm.
By dictionary definition, a podcast is an MP3 or video file that is serviced via an RSS, and Spotify and YouTube are not that.
Right. No.
Do you have a this is all the inside baseball that the listeners at home are craving.
This is great.
Much like Count Dracula thinking about Mina for 2,000 years, this is the what the listeners yearn for. Stuart, when you upload to RSS, does it auto-populate to Spotify, or is that a separate thing you have to do?
It auto.
Okay, cool.
Auto-populates.
Okay.
Well, it auto-populates to a bunch of services. That's why we're on a bunch of different platforms. We're on Amazon Music. We're on
I think we are too. I have to set something up to make it start auto-populating to Spotify.
Yeah.
And I won't do that because of the principle of I don't like that Spotify makes you listen on their service. And B, I think Spotify drops ads on it on their own that they're not paying out for. And in both those cases, I'm like, no, I'm not going to take the 20 minutes or whatever to get the show on Spotify. Listen to it on a normal podcast service, you fucking nerds.
Yeah.
I'm an Apple podcast person. Which has finally started changing. Did you notice this?
Well, so say what you're going to say. I have another update.
for a podcast service.
We will talk about Dracula probably in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, probably.
That's funny because I use Apple Podcasts, and Becca makes these incredible like specific like cover arts for
They're
each.
great.
She makes for every individual episode. She makes one.
The Night on Earth one looks so fucking cool.
It's so cool.
So good.
But she makes individual ones, and like I use them on the social medias to advertise. But
Few
Stuart,
days after they
Stuart
come out.
uploads them on infrequently. Stuart uploads them onto the at least they all get posted eventually.
I'm better than me.
But Stuart puts those in like the RSS file. And it was always annoying as an Apple Podcast person that it didn't change the form. It only used the show logo. And whatever iOS update just came out, they actually started changing the logos.
That's nice.
Which is nice because like both because it's nice when I watch a podcast to see what the host intended for me to look at, but also it's nice to just see Becca's work on my phone, which is nice.
I was going to say Google Podcast is shutting down.
It is shutting down in a few weeks.
I gotta
Turning
update the
into-
postscript.
They're allocating it now to YouTube Music.
Yes.
YouTube Music is going to be the new Google Podcast or whatever. So I don't know what that means because we're auto uploaded to both. So I don't know if that means we're automatically going to go now to YouTube Music. However,
If that means I don't have to upload to YouTube
well,
anymore,
Jeff, I have something to tell you.
Yes.
It's something I noticed 2 weeks ago and I just haven't had the courage to tell you. RSS does have an auto YouTube upload button.
what the fuck?
Wouldn't you still have to, because doesn't YouTube treat it as a video file with just a
Yes.
static image? So wouldn't you
Yes.
still have to upload a second file, or
No.
it'll auto?
It'll auto
Okay, that's
put it
nice.
on. And
Cole, do
it'll
you want to
match
know what
your
the process has
description.
been for the past 3 years?
I am fully aware. I can totally extrapolate what it would
fucking
be.
Premiere Pro, drag the image, and then Stuart, did I?
That's
ever
why I had to stop doing it,
Stuart,
Jeff.
did I tell you the issue I ran into when I started doing it?
What did you run into?
So the first time I did it, it's a static image and an audio file.
Mm-hmm.
Put it in there, and I press the export button, and it's like 4 hours for export. I'm like, how?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah.
And then I realized I was exporting these static images in like
4K.
4K.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's when I was like, you know what? We don't have to do this.
No,
so I dropped it down to 1080.
No, drop it down to 720. Like, again, there's no reason somebody should watch the quality of the static image.
It should be in whatever Becca renders the image in to maintain the fidelity.
What if I was
The image file.
What if I put my fucking like foot down and I was like, no, we upload in 4K.
It's just like, because I remember I first brought it up to you, Jeff. I'm like, we should stop uploading to YouTube until you showed me our YouTube analytics that
It's actually
we actually have pretty good YouTube viewership.
Cole, you know what's really funny about our YouTube?
That makes sense because people who listen to podcasts on YouTube and Brendan Fraser fans both cannot be trusted with their own finances.
Cole, you know what's really funny about our YouTube?
Please.
Is like they usually all will be like 10 to 100 listens. That's kind of like the range that they all wind up in, with the exception of a few that the algorithm has randomly decided, like just whenever you look up movies, this will now be the top result, which has resulted in our Thin Red Line episode, I believe, having upwards of 25,000 views.
Whoa!
But if you look at the analytics of the video,
It's
The Thin Red
all-
Line.
It's, you know what it is? I can tell you.
It's all
this.
people who thought it's the movie. 'Cause
No,
it's roughly the same
it's
length.
it's the same people who did money fraud for Sound of Freedom. It's Jim Caviezel boosters, like screwing the numbers and running bots to stream that episode.
Yeah, here's our Thin Red Line episode. It has 28,905 views.
You should do a Jim podcast.
I would-
That wouldn't be
Top,
difficult.
top comment, guys. Jim Caviezel is not the guy with the wife. I don't know what that means. And then the comment below is a thumbs down.
because they thought it was the fucking
Yeah, they
movie.
thought it was the movie.
77 likes.
But if you actually, how many dislikes though? Well, I forgot YouTube doesn't show the
YouTube
amount of
killed the
dislikes.
dislikes.
They killed the
Yeah,
dislikes.
Why is it there?
I don't.
I guess for algorithmic.
Maybe.
blah, blah, blah.
But if you look at the analytics, it's clearly people click on it and listen for 1 minute and then they exit out.
Ladder 49, 5.3 thousand views.
Oh,
All the people who tuned in, and they all drop off at the same point.
Yeah, when you said
I disrespect-
Kentucky Fried.
And I disrespect the entire art of firefighting.
yeah. Fuck you for that, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Are great American heroes. There is no such thing as an attractive cop and no such thing as an ugly firefighter.
Agreed.
All firefighters are 10s. They're If you're gonna keep doing that, I'm gonna leave.
So Cole, how you liking the new board?
Don't like morning zoo shit.
You haven't commented on that whole opening intro yet.
Yeah, it was good. I
was a little disturbed.
I don't want to like condone Jeff hijinks because I'm worried about what might happen later in this recording if I give him credit.
Yeah.
I'm a little nervous.
I might have some ideas.
Yeah.
You know what else I have ideas on? The 1992 motion picture Bram Stoker's Dracula. Starring Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Anthony Hopkins, Keanu Reeves, Richard E. Grant, Cary Elwes, Billy Campbell, Sadie Frost, and Tom Waits.
There we go.
Stop this.
It's not even what the score sounds like. Who did the score for this movie? It's so good.
Woke Jack Killar.
Who else? What else?
I'm looking.
Give me those credits, baby.
I don't know if there's. He did the Truman Show.
Okay, it's a good score. Yeah.
Oh no, he.
Except it's not really a score because it's mostly the fucking.
Okay, he didn't actually do the Truman Show
score.
Yeah, they used music he composed for something. He has not done anything else really. He's where's he from? He's a Polish guy. It looks like he's basically just done Polish movie. He did The Pianist. That's the one other movie I recognize here. Oh, and The Portrait of a Lady, the Nicole Kidman one.
That's a movie.
In the Ninth Gate.
How many polls does it take to compose a score for a major Hollywood film?
3.
Just one, as long as you can mostly use Philip Glass music. That's a fucking Truman Show joke for all you Truman Show heads out there who know that that's just the fucking Poyaniscotsky score.
Yeah.
Okay, Dracula. Oh, Jesus Christ. All right. I'll just fucking dive in. Let's go into the context corner. As we all know, I've been reading the Winona Ryder biography, synchronous with the movies that we've been covering. And this was a somewhat beefy chapter.
Movie.
Yeah, leading up to the creation of or the release of this movie. Mostly in regards to how this movie gets made, which is basically not entirely dependent on Winona, but she's kind of the initial spark that launches the creation of this movie.
She gives the script to Coppola when she's still on Godfather, right?
Not exactly.
After she dropped out.
After she drops out. Okay.
Well, I'll quickly summarize the Godfather thing, which is that when Coppola makes Godfather Part 3, he initially attempts to cast Julia Roberts in the role of Mary Corleone. I struggle to remember. Is it
That's
Mary?
insane.
Yeah. She's unavailable, so he casts Winona Ryder in the role. Winona flies to Italy and starts production of the movie. She has a nervous breakdown in addition to a scheduling conflict with mermaids that results in her dropping the movie after like a week of filming.
Wasn't there a story she also like passed out from exhaustion?
That's the like the nervous breakdown,
Okay.
like full exhaustion. Just like she was going from movie to movie to movie.
Yeah.
And so she quits the movie, is afraid that Coppola is going to harbor a grudge. Notoriously chill man.
But not someone who actually harbors grudges. Weirdly enough, someone who's kind of chill about that sort of thing.
Well, it's funny because that does loop back around at the end of this. So she's nervous he's going to harbor a grudge, but she goes and she makes mermaids, takes like 2 years off essentially to kind of recompose herself. In that time, she's just reading scripts that are coming her way. One of them is James Hart's script for this movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula, just kind of a more truthful and erotic adaptation of the Dracula novel by Bram Stoker. And she's really interested in it. And she kind of just like puts it aside and is like, I want to play Mina in this, but I'm going to, just take my time right now.
Yeah.
She arranges a lunch date with Coppola because she, like I said, she's afraid that he's harboring a grudge and she wants to kind of smooth that over and talk to him, be like, hey, I'd love to do something with you in the future. This was situations out of my control. I'm not the reason. Just kind of smooth things over. She gets there and Coppola's like, oh yeah, it's totally fine, whatever. He has no issues with her having left The Godfather. But what does happen in this is she's like, hey, I think you'd be really good for this script of Dracula. You should read it. And he's initially resisting. He's like, it's fucking Dracula. Who wants to do that? Then he reads the opening with like Vlad the Impaler, like it's putting all the people on spikes. He's like, oh, this whips. And he immediately is like, this is my next movie.
Yeah.
Winona obviously going to play the role of Mina. That's kind of what she pitches to him when she gives him the script. he goes right into, this is my next movie.
Yeah.
Has she ever? I know you haven't really looked at anything post this, but like, do you know if there's like a sense of her ever having this like defuncto producer role elsewhere? Because from like a development perspective, like she is very on the money vis-a-vis that this script and this hook is a good fit for her and Coppola, right?
Yeah.
Like she fucking nails that in a way that mostly I think of like actor producers are good at.
This is definitely the first time she's done it.
Okay.
I don't know too much in the future. We'll kind of figure that out as we go through. I've never really heard a story about any of the other movies necessarily.
Me neither, yeah.
But like obviously she does gain a little more clout in the movies that she appears in the future. But this is the first, and as far as I'm aware, like the biggest time where she's the one who kind of gets a movie made. And that's very essential, like where we're at with her career. So we talked last week, just kind of recapping the first era of her career.
Yeah.
I once again have an issue with when you're dividing that line, by the way.
I think this is the best one.
This is the best.
I think this is a very clean cutoff.
No, don't you think that it should be one episode earlier? Don't
think Night on Earth?
Before Night on Earth?
Because that's the her doing like serious auteurist stretches.
We thought about it, but here's the thing. In that movie, she's still playing a rebellious teen.
Sure.
And that is the last thing she does before she takes a 2-year break.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense.
And in the minor league of rebellious teen, she's been playing like shortstop and pitcher. Night on Earth, she's in right field.
Yeah.
So like
she's in one segment of that movie.
I've seen I've seen Night on Earth.
I almost blew my voice out recording that episode because I tried to do the Tom Waits song.
After like spending a year watching like dumb movies for man children, did you guys like faint when you watched a mid-tier Jim Jarmusch movie just off the like sheer injection of quality?
Yeah.
I mean, we both really liked it.
The movie's not even that good, is the thing.
It's on base.
It's on base.
We described it as being like the best 2 a.m. movie you could watch alone at night.
Sure, except for all the other Jim Jarmusch movies that are better than it.
Is all Jim Jarmusch movies like midnight 2 a.m.?
You should watch Mystery Train. Oh, you should fucking watch Mystery Train.
Yeah. Okay.
God, what was I just saying? Oh, yeah. So this is
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Because she does, like we were talking about last week in our retrospective, she does come out of the last two movies, Mermaids and Night on Earth, being like, all right, I've kind of said my piece with playing like rebellious teens, playing teens. I want to play adult characters in adult movies. Mm-hmm. I want to just like be respected as an act for my talent instead of just being like a pop culture icon. And so it's very interesting to me that this is what she picks up as like, this is how I want to announce myself after this 2-year break.
Because is it this right into Age of Innocence, right into Reality Bites?
It's this right into Age of Innocence, right into House of the Spirits, and then Reality Bites.
Not a real movie.
The House of the
I've never heard of that.
Our guest for that episode has no idea what that movie is. They just thought it was a funny title and picked it. So
What is House of the Spirits?
it's her and Meryl Streep.
Cool. That makes sense if you want to work with.
I also know nothing what that movie is about. It's another period drama. She basically has 3 period dramas in a row. Stars Meryl Streep, Glenn Close, Jeremy Irons, Winona Ryder, Antonio Banderas.
Okay, so like when a lot of those people are like really hot too, though, that makes sense. Who directed it?
It's directed by Billy August.
Oh, okay. So Billy August is like just one of his fucking second Palme d'Or. He's like coming to Hollywood. Like, okay, that's an interesting. Yeah, that lands with his career move.
This all works out.
Billy August has 2 Palme d'Ors.
Yeah,
and no one knows who he is.
For The Best Intentions and Pele the Conqueror. Pele the Conqueror with the best poster ever? Excuse me.
So the thing you have to understand is that Pele the Conqueror was a massive hit.
Yeah.
And a huge critical beloved thing. Mm-hmm. Best Intentions is not a movie that anyone has ever seen. And literally all it is that Ingmar Bergman, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a big name in Swedish cinema.
Right.
Famously, when he was on his like hot streak in the middle of the century, the Cannes programming team was like at odds with the movies he was making. So Ingmar Bergman never won a Palme d'Or. He was like maybe in competition like once or twice, right? The Best Intentions is a biopic of Bergman's parents. So Billy August wins his second Palm functionally because at this point Bergman's retired, functionally as a way for them to like de facto
apologize.
Yeah. It's like someone else getting the makeup Oscar,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
And
That's
he
why
wrote-
we've never heard of that movie.
And Ingmar also wrote the script for it.
Yes.
Anyway, he also directed House of the Spirits, a movie we're talking about in 2 weeks. That doesn't exist.
Yeah, because Billy August is not a real director.
Fake movie.
That
Fake
has
beat.
2 Palm d'Ors.
It's almost 2.5 hours long. That's the thing about that movie is that because
20 minutes longer than this one, and this one's long.
yeah, this is a beefy movie.
Beefy.
It wasn't as beefy as I thought it would be, though.
But it's like the good type of beefy.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I started the movie at 9:30 p.m. last night.
The perfect time to watch this movie.
It is until you're like in bed with a heated blanket in winter in Chicago with your two pillows on your back, and you're just like.
I did watch half of this last night and
Yeah.
half of this morning.
I
because
almost considered
this
that.
movie does kind of like lull me into like a trance like state. Like
Yeah.
I did not bring notes with me today, as you two can see,
Yeah.
because I like could not stop watching the movie.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Yeah.
this movie is so entrancing.
You don't wanna look away.
That I like was not even thinking of things to say
Yeah.
or ideas to jot down.
Which
I
is
love this movie.
I adore
to
this
be
movie.
clear, I adore
I
this movie.
do think this is probably in the top 5 movies we talked about on this show.
Wow.
I would say that.
What's better?
Blowout?
Maybe
I put Blowout above.
Maybe that's the only one that I could think of.
Gods and Monsters.
I like I'm a big Gods and Monsters
Gods and
guy.
Monsters is bad.
I like Gods and Monsters.
good.
Gods and
I'm
Monsters.
a big Gods and
No.
Monsters
Gods
guy.
and Monsters is really good.
No, it's bad. It's a bad movie.
And then
It's like the most sexless movie I've ever seen in my life. Disrespectful to James Whale.
really.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Not enough twinks.
Oh. I was like, that sounds like a conversation we could have. And then you
enough
said not enough twinks.
cocks.
G.I. Joe Rise of No, I'm kidding.
I was gonna say that is the last movie you covered.
That is the last one I covered. It was like
In
a year
secret.
ago because
Yeah.
we recorded that one so early.
I listened to this
too.
in preparation because I had not remembered what a Cole Bradley episode sounded like until I got into which that one you weren't even slated on. You just jumped on mid episode.
I'm just deeply upset Mark Tilley.
Deeply upset at Mark Tilley.
I mean, yeah, I was like, what else? I mean, I think there's a future Winona movie that I probably like more than this one.
Is it? I keep getting told by next week's guest that Age of Innocence.
And it's not Age of Innocence, but Age of Innocence is a fucking banger.
It's great.
Yeah.
Are you pitching the Alien Resurrection
No,
supremacy?
Alien Resurrection is bad.
It's no good.
There might be another one that I'm booked on that I think is maybe better than this one.
Darkly. No, wait, no, not Darkly. Scanner Darkly.
Scanner Darkly,
Yeah,
yeah.
Scanner Darkly.
I really that's a Cole Bradley movie though.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
All right. But so Winona gets the project
Yeah.
Coppola, who immediately launches right into it. He's trying to cast the movie around Winona, essentially. So a lot of the actors do chemistry tests with Winona.
Yeah.
Which I think it's very important to remember when you're watching this movie, that she's kind of the impetus of the casting process.
Yeah.
She is also clearly the protagonist,
Yes.
which Mina is not traditionally the protagonist.
Yeah.
She's not the protagonist of the novel, though she is like the POV character for much of it because of the weird structure of it. And she's not the protagonist of the Browning version.
Yeah.
In the slightest.
That move, I watched the.
It's not
It's
good.
very boring.
It's very
Which one are we talking about?
the Bela Lugosi original Dracula,
What year is this one?
like 1932.
1931.
Oh,
one.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I have not seen it. I've seen Nosferatu, but I have not
Nosferatu
seen.
fucking rules.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
Nosferatu, and I actually like that's some. I have like maybe 2 points to like point out there with like the Nosferatu
Yeah.
over. Oh,
Nosferatu.
The
Yeah.
only thing the Browning one has going for it, the Browning one is a real like early sound. We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like creaker. The only thing it has going for it is that the first 15 minutes, the Renfield stuff
Are really good.
They're really good, and Lugosi in general.
Yeah.
For all that I kind of rag on Lugosi as a performer, Lugosi is very good in Dracula.
Yeah.
Like that is undeniable. He's just not Boris Karloff in Frankenstein.
Yeah.
That's so good. But so she's kind of the impetus of the casting. They all cast around her. All the actors they're considering for Dracula all have to do chemistry tests with her.
Do we know who else was in the
Coppola
mix?
wanted Day-Lewis, but he was already booked on Last of the Mohicans.
Yeah, it's not good, but
I heard
Yeah.
they
it's good next
almost casted Liam Neeson for Van Helsing, but then it was like
Decided to go with crazed Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins right off the coattails of
Bullet Dodge,
Silence
baby.
of the Lambs.
It's me. I'm
Which-
Van Helsing.
I love.
It's-
To be clear, I love Liam Neeson, but I'm not
Well,
giving that Hopkins
I
performance. away
read
for
that
anything.
IMDb trivia fact about it that like because of his it was like it worded in the phrasing of like Liam Neeson was once considered for Van Helsing, but after Anthony Hopkins' skyrocket rise in fame from Silence of the Lambs, they put him instead. And I thought, wait a minute. If his skyrocket in fame was Silence of the Lambs, why isn't he Dracula in this movie? Like, I feel like putting him from like Hannibal to the
because Dracula has to be young.
right. That's okay.
Because
yeah.
Dracula needs to be a young.
That's very
man, all
true.
the
That's
makeup.
very true.
I will say this though about Neeson. I know this novel and movie is set in London,
Yeah.
but no one really talks about this. But Dracula is kind of the like most culturally important work of art to come out of Ireland in the past couple hundred years, even if he was living in London when he wrote
Yeah.
it. Like Bram Stoker is Irish.
Oh, I'm learning this.
Yeah.
First time.
It would have been nice to have one Irish actor
Yeah.
in the movie. He was Irish, but he lived in London.
Okay.
He
Yeah.
was kind of in the
So it's a gray area. It's not like
but he's Irish. He's an Irish writer, yeah.
I'm just not learning that.
I pulled up the page from the Winona biography about the other actors who screen tested
Do you
with
love he
Winona.
has 2 fucking tablets?
Yeah, it's great.
So the people who screen tested opposite Winona, I do want to say that Andy Garcia approached Coppola about it, but then said, I don't want to do the love scenes. And so Coppola's like, well, then you can't be in the movie. But the screen tests were Armand Assante.
Asante.
Asante.
Cool.
Gabriel Byrne.
Okay. Makes sense. Irish.
Viggo Mortensen. Antonio Banderas.
That
And Gary Oldman.
Banderas. The problem with Banderas is that then you're like just right thick in the fucking
the
like
lovey-
xenophobia stuff of the novel that I think this movie pointedly is like not wanting, because there's this subtext in the novel that some adaptations lean into in good and bad ways and some adaptations ignore.
Yeah.
That like Dracula is the like Eastern European creature defiling like the good whiteness of Western Europe.
Oh, yeah.
And that is not the capitulation of Dracula in this text as someone from Eastern Europe is not to be read as the other, the way that like
Yeah.
Bela Lugosi is like this foreign monster, right? And if Banderas is there, even though he's obviously not, he is from Western Europe, but because he's darker skinned
Yeah.
and Reeves is more ethnic, you're kind of tiptoeing into that minefield that I just don't think Coppola wants to be like
He didn't have an interest in that.
exploring that space. And there were
I understand what you're saying, though.
there
yeah.
were good adaptations of Dracula that play with that sort of like defilement of whiteness in interesting ways. That is just not the movie I think Coppola wanted to make.
Yeah. Because he takes the I'll loop back to it later, but he takes the same idea of like a foreign body invading and makes it much more about like the sexuality, and there's the civilization line.
The implicit AIDS.
Yeah, the AIDS
metaphor
parallels
throughout this whole thing.
He kind of does the same idea, but with that instead of making it specifically about cultural difference.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen or heard of Guy Madden's Dracula, Pages from a Virgin's Diary?
No.
That is a Dracula movie from, I want to say 2001, 2002. It's an adaptation of a Canadian ballet. It was supposed to be a pro shot, but Guy Madden like decided to just like restage the whole thing in his own. But that ballet is mostly about the Dracula seducing Mina stuff. I'm sorry, Lucy stuff. And it is actually kind of a romance. And that one they cast a Chinese ballerina to play Dracula. So instead of like a threat, it's like this romantic allure of an interracial relationship. And recasting Dracula as that. That and this are, I think, the most interesting Dracula movies.
Because it's a public domain text at this point.
So you can do it. Not at this point. It's a public domain text in the States by like 1905, I think.
Yeah.
Because he fucks up the copyright.
We could go and make a Dracula movie right now. So it is one of those things that is interesting that you can do anything you want with it, basically.
You both are going to punch me in the fucking groin for bringing up this comparison, but like I just have to say it because it's something that I just recently kind of looked at and found out. There's a very popular game a lot of people are playing called Baldur's Gate 3.
Yep.
And spoiler alert.
It's not a spoiler.
No. What do you mean?
Are you about to say what I think you're about to say?
The Cazador vampire boss.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that Asterian's a vampire, which I've been saying.
No,
that's not a spoiler.
That's that part. No.
The vampire,
It was something that interesting that as you guys were just talking about, it brought up to my mind. So, spoiler alert for folks who are going through the Baldur's Gate 3 campaign right now and you're interested in the Asterian storyline, this is a spoiler for that particular storyline, so skip a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But Asterian, whose backstory is he's a vampire, spawn who got turned by a vampire lord named Cazador. And he's sort of hinted at Acts 1 and 2 as being like this big boss you're eventually going to have to fight in Act 3, which is Asterian's master. And so, but you don't see him. You see a bunch of henchmen he sends out. And in the game, you're thinking, you're trying to fill in the blanks of what does Cazador look like? And of course, like me, who's like, I'm not that in depth in this literature and lore you guys have been talking about too much. I'm like, my knowledge of vampire movies is Van Helsing, Underworld, and Twilight. Like, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know the deep lore of like vampires and stuff.
This is what you're envisioning?
Kinda. But like but not even that. Like I'd say more kind of underworld style, like a Charles Dance Dracula from
Charles Dance is in Underworld.
No. Charles Dance from Dracula Untold.
Charles Dance is in Dracula Untold.
Yes, he is.
I believe
like
you.
You're thinking about old white man kind of style, and then when I get to Act 3, you see Cazador. He turns around, and it's like and of course it's animated video game, obviously, but like. The animation's very clearly saying it's like, no, this is like a immortal 30-year-old Asian man.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, like it just completely like there was like
He's
maybe
ordinary.
Yeah, it's a 2-second bump in my head.
Yeah.
That I put 130 hours in this game.
Yeah.
So you have to imagine like
That fight sucks.
115 hours. I had been envisioning what this big vampire lord boss is going to look like, and he turns around, it's like a 30-year-old Asian guy, and I'm like, oh. I don't know. I guess I don't know what I was expecting, but like, it's so. I bring that up from what you guys were saying.
I hated that fight so much,
dude.
It was so
Shadowheart,
hard.
Daylight, bunch of radiant spells. You're good.
I spec'd Shadowheart poorly. I think I need to make another pass that game because everyone said
go to camp, take control of her character, go to Withers.
I did
change
that.
her class to light.
I of course did that. I think
good.
I spec'd her more stat wise, equipment wise,
okay.
poorly because it was so hard keeping her alive. And
Yeah.
everyone always says that like Shadowheart can blow through so much of the stuff with the light powers. And I had that thought because I played enough D&D that I like.
Yeah.
I understand how mechanics integrate with each other.
Yeah.
Back to that public domain thing though.
Yes.
I've been thinking about this a lot because, we're recording this in January, so it's been like 3 weeks since Steamboat Willie went to the public domain, and there's been all this public domain chatter with Steamboat Willie, and we had the same thing last year with Winnie the Pooh. And I've been thinking a lot about how Frankenstein is an old enough text by the time that mass media pops up, it's already public domain.
Yeah.
But Dracula and Night of the Living Dead, the George Romero movie, through fuck ups on behalf of the creators enter the public domain prematurely. That in both cases, Bram Stoker and George Romero like screw up the copyright filings, basically. I don't know 100% the details of what happened with Dracula, but that novel enters the public domain very early in the United States, and Night of the Living Dead enters the public domain like 6 months after its release in the United States. And I think in both those cases, though, like, I think sometimes people are like, well, they were robbed of all the money they could have made off this thing. But you also have to think of it is that zombies and vampires as an idea are now no longer copyrightable concepts because so much of our conception of vampires is rooted in Dracula. And the reason that happens is because people are allowed to write vampire fiction that pulls freely from Dracula as a source of inspiration without the Stoker estate like fucking jumping on them
Yeah.
and being like, we created this. We own the aristocrat idea, right? We
Yeah.
own the idea of refinement. We own the mirror thing. Like,
Yeah.
there's all this stuff. And like,
yeah.
Romero creates the modern conception of zombie so whole hog in that movie that then like he can't claim ownership of
The concept.
the concept, right? So like anyone can go do that stuff. And just the culture at large is so much better for the fact that people are allowed to like mix and match with the ideas that Bram Stoker puts in this not very good book. Just to the fact that like now we have a broader lineage of vampires and idea
Yeah.
that is so rooted in his thing that wouldn't exist
If it was-
he had
if it-
control
if
If he had
over
control of it.
Yeah.
I think that's
That's
actually
an incredible point.
that's an incredible point you just made, because how many times when people talk about zombie apocalypses is, well, I would survive in George Romero's zombie apocalypse, but I would not survive in Dawn of the Dead zombie apocalypse because
Yeah,
of the
but Dawn
different
of the Dead
variation-
doesn't exist if
Exactly.
there's not fucking Living Dead of the Manchester Morgue.
100%.
Right? That, like all these Night of the Living Dead knockoffs help shape the thing.
That there's walking zombies, there's running
Mm-hmm.
zombies, there's vampires that can walk in the day, there's vampires who can't, there's
No Asterion, I think, is the point I'm making.
Absolutely.
Because obviously there are like more like higher class vampires in fiction that predate Dracula, because there's
Yeah.
like Carmella from like 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
But like much I read a bit of recently departed David J. Scull's book, Hollywood Gothic, which is about the kind of early development of Dracula on the stage and then into the Bela Lugosi Todd Browning movie. But I mostly just read stuff about the writing of the book and the publishing of the book.
Yeah.
And he talks a lot about that Dracula is responding to like a century of popular vampire fiction in Europe and in England and in France.
Okay.
But so much of that idea of vampires pre-Stoker and pre-Carmella is like almost more like a zombie-like creature, almost more like in Nosferatu, that is just this like monster that preys on people during the night. It's not necessarily like a personality.
with a person with a conscience.
Well, a
and-
conscience. And
Yeah.
even if Dracula doesn't really have a conscience in that novel, like that's something people take from the novel and build on.
Exactly.
That now that we like kick that back to that's the core idea of Count Dracula.
I think it's the key differentiation between werewolves and vampires. That 100%.
Proto Stoker vampires are much more akin to werewolves or like chupacabras.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
they're like vaguely humanistic.
But don't have a humanistic consciousness and are just
or
monsters.
a persona.
Yeah.
Which Dracula in the novel is kind of half of one,
Half
six
one,
of one,
half
half a
the
dozen
other.
of the other.
Yeah.
Where he is more of like, feels at times like a monster who has learned how to walk and talk like a human.
Yeah.
As opposed to say the Oldman take, which is that he's a corrupted,
He's a corrupted human.
which I personally think is more interesting, is the idea of the corrupted human.
but
Because
that's the Oldman thing, and Stoker's more
Stoker's
half and
more
half.
like you're like a lizard in a human skin, to quote Fulci.
okay.
Right? That like, because you get bits of that in this movie, right? Where you got like the hair on the palms,
Yeah.
and the like crawling all over the building,
Yeah.
and there is this sense of like this is some. I've read this novel many moons ago. I reread about half of it for this recording. I just couldn't get it finished because it's so boring. It is a bad novel, to be clear.
And I have the novel. I've never read it. It's written like in first person POV dispatches.
It's
essentially, right?
it's an epistolary novel, which is very popular in Victorian
Yeah.
literature. So it's like the first chunk of it is Harker's journal as he goes to Transylvania and gets trapped, and then the rest of it is Mina's journal, Lucy's journal, Seward's journal, letters people are writing to each other, news clippings, the captain's log from the Demeter.
Yeah.
It becomes much more of a like collage.
Did anyone see that movie?
It's the worst movie of 2023.
man.
It sucks so bad. I know.
I actually was thinking about watching it.
It was such a good idea.
Yeah, but it sucks. Oh.
It's just interminably dull. Right?
Okay.
It's like it's not even that
They
it
made
does anything offensive.
2 nightmarish Dracula movies in 2023.
What was the other one?
Renfield.
Oh,
But
I
like
heard that one
Renfield,
wasn't that good either.
Renfield, like you can point at Renfield and be like, well, these are just like calamitous decisions that are being made. It's like a wildly ill-conceived
Stuart, what
movie.
do you think the main conflict of Renfield is?
He wants to get laid.
No, what do you think, like, the story, like, the plot line that the characters are on is
You're
about?
never gonna guess.
What is it?
Tell me what you think. I
I'm
want to
gonna
hear some
switch
guesses.
seats with you, Stuart.
I want to hear some guesses.
He wants to get laid. He wants to.
The plot. The thing.
I don't know.
The physical task that characters are on. Stuart, the motion picture released in April 2023, Renfield, is about the
New
New Orleans Police Department engaging in a drug bust of a prominent Latin crime ring that happens to have a vampire maybe connected to it. It is
But like that's
half
the point.
that movie is Aquafina in a cop outfit, just being like, "We gotta bust these guys."
Okay.
Yeah, that movie is about Aquafina is a traffic cop who's like stuck being a traffic cop because she's the only member of the New Orleans PD who wants to like take down the local mob and everyone else is on their payroll.
Yeah.
So she's like being kept down and she like teams up with Renfield to like bust the mob. So the mob teams up with Dracula to bust Renfield. That is what that movie's about. But that's my point, right? That movie is like a calamitous series of decisions. You can't look at Last Voyage of the Demeter the same way, even though I think it's a worse movie. Last Voyage of the Demeter is just like, it does nothing
Interesting.
right. It's just
Damn
a failure.
Damn
and
That's so sad.
Alien on a boat is a great idea, and it executes every aspect of it incorrectly. It is just bad, and it's 2 hours long. You're just sitting there praying for death.
Oh my god, it's almost as long as this. And
Yeah,
you know what the
it's
Last
like
Voyage of the Demeter? You know how much the Last Voyage of the Demeter takes in this movie? It's like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's a great transition.
Yeah.
You're just watching a boat over Dracula's eyes, like superimposed on the screen flying by, and you hear a guy go, "There's something aboard with us." And then the boat
he's
comes
like-
in, there's all these storm clouds, and Winona's like shutting the
he's
windows.
in like fucking like uteral lining because he's like rebirthing as a younger Gary Oldman. Oh, it's so fucking. This movie's so fucking good.
This movie is great. Do we want to just start going through it?
Let's just start going through it.
Because I think we're about to get sidetracked with a probably 2-hour discussion about the most crucial question we have to answer today.
I'm not looking forward to that.
The most crucial question.
It is the issue on hand with this movie, annoyingly though.
Yeah. It's so movie starts. We get the opening of Dracula essentially as Vlad the Impaler
Yeah.
in 1400s AD.
I saw this movie for the first time probably when I was like 14.
Yeah.
Right? And like I don't necessarily know that it's the case anymore, but I do feel like because this movie was a big hit, and this was a big hit, this movie had like a very long cultural tale where I was just like very well aware before I had seen this movie of just a lot of like the imagery of the movie. And especially like a lot of like the imagery of Gary Oldman and what he looks like in this movie. And yet still sitting down watching this movie and like 30 seconds in, he puts on this like insane. This might have been. This might have
the
actually
red,
been
like-
the first Coppola movie. I may have seen The Godfather already.
It's like the red Blood Knight
but
armor.
he puts on this Blood Knight armor that I can't even like fully describe. And I remember just being like, well, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And
First
that is
thing
my-
off the bat.
That is my only memory of the first time I watched this. Truly,
Yeah.
is just how intense I found this like 3-minute opening prologue.
And the score for this movie, which is quite shocking, the guy hasn't really done much else. It's incredible. And you're just like, I think a lot about the scene in The Matrix Resurrections.
Yes.
Where they finally get to Io and Jada Pinkett Smith is talking with Neo and is like, you hear that? And the score, it's just completely silent. It's just like, think about all that noise the Matrix is always pumping into your ears. And you realize that the whole movie up to that point, there's never been a silent moment. Even in moments of ostensible silence, there's just been background noise, just kind of filling the space. And I think about that a lot with this movie when I was watching, because like it is just this cacophony of noise that's just being constantly thrown at you. Then about halfway through, there's like a moment with Mina and Dracula where it just goes silent. And it is just like this incredible display of filmmaking where it's just like it's bombarding you endlessly.
Yeah.
And then finally you just have a moment where you catch your breath and you're like, I didn't even notice how that was working on me this whole time.
Yeah.
And that's why I think about that Matrix scene so much when I'm watching movies like this that really use sound as this, this tool against you.
Is a book that I am blanking on the name of, and I am trying to look up, that I read a few years ago, that is about the Todd Browning Dracula and the James Whale Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Right? Those first two Universal horror movies. And kind of locking them into the development of like sound technology in film, because those are such early, sound films.
Yeah.
And that there's this idea that like when they made the Todd Browning Dracula, they had only just figured out audio post-production. Right? That like that's one of the first movies made with Foleyed sound. Ever. But they have yet to figure out multi-track. They can't mix anything.
Right.
So if you watch that first Dracula movie and a sound effect gets layered on top of things, it is the only sound in the movie, and it's only one,
and it drops everything else out.
And because it has to drop everything else out because they can't mix it.
They put it on top of it. Oh,
they literally they're not even putting it on top of it. They're cutting the location audio track and putting in a studio track.
Oh,
in.
that's so interesting.
And it is once you remember that. I can't remember the name of this book, but it does give that movie, that original one, this very like dreamlike nightmare feel that I think the like dips out of sound in this. So much of this movie is Coppola like reveling in
the old
early film
yeah.
craft technology, and less Coppola, actually more so his son reveling in early like cinematic techniques.
His son.
I would almost say this is one of the most impressive displays of like, I would honestly say craft, just film craft.
Yeah.
Of its time.
Absolutely.
Francis Ford Coppola did not want to use contemporary
film tools
in the making of this movie. So you will often hear people say that all the effects in this movie are in camera, which I don't think is, we can debate to what degree in camera is in camera, but there is like, it's so basic that there is no traditional matte work in this movie, right? Like if normally it would call for a matte, he instead uses rear projection. The only reason I would quibble with that is there's a lot of double exposure photography where they film something and then use the same reel of film to film something again.
Yeah, it's like the rat across the screen. They filmed the rat running on a bar, flipped it upside down, and then
so basically like normally you would use like an optical printer or even just like computer editing, though this is still too early to do that, but you use like optical printing or other techniques to like composite those two images together. He didn't want to do that. But so it looks like Stuart doesn't know this.
I don't. But I'm very interested.
This was his big idea to pitch this, and he went to all like the big effects houses, and they were like, can't be done.
Okay.
And so he said, fine. And so he went to his son, Roman Coppola, who is a filmmaker in his own right, but I think is probably best known for doing writing and doing second unit and production design on most Wes Anderson movies.
Okay.
Listeners, if you've ever wondered why Wes Anderson like develops that dollhouse aesthetic in between Bottle Rocket and Rushmore, it's because Rushmore, he starts working with Roman Coppola.
Yeah.
And Roman Coppola brings a lot of the like paper mache stop motion dollhouse stuff to Wes Anderson. But Roman's young at this point. But Coppola basically goes to Roman and is like, you want to just fuck around.
Yeah.
And so Roman Coppola does all the effects and a lot of the second unit photography for this movie. Wow. And basically just this idea of just try anything.
Yeah.
And we'll see if it works, and we don't need to like make it look cohesive as an idea. We just want it to look cool.
He just kind of gave his son a camera and was like, go fuck around and we'll find out.
I mean, all the Dracula POV stuff is Roman on his own.
Yeah.
With a camera, with a still camera.
Yeah.
With a
Wait,
still
wait,
camera.
what?
Yeah. Because that's...
Wait a minute.
I don't know if he had seen all the Dracula...
POV stuff
POV
going into
stuff
places.
is all stop motion, time lapse photography. It's Roman moving through the set, taking each frame individually, and that's why it has this like lurch energy to it. Which I don't know if he had seen this because I don't think it had gotten much of a US release. But that is also what Shinya Tsukamoto does in Tetsuo the Iron Man, which comes out a few years before this. But Shinya Tsukamoto does it much smoother than Roman Coppola does.
Because it's interesting that it's the same basic idea that Sam Raimi kind of invents in Evil Dead. But whereas Sam Raimi is just like grabbing a 60mm camera and just fucking sprinting through the woods and then playing it back faster later, the idea of, getting that artificial, like, weird shifting to it.
Kind of rapid shutter walking.
Yeah, really does work with the still imagery. Yeah. Because obviously you can't be exact. Like, you're not going to get the exact same line. Your hands and your body are going to shift slightly. So you're not getting a straight line of movement. And you're getting like this.
My understanding is that it's literally just Roman like walking through and just like intuitively feeling like when he thinks lurches should happen, when he thinks it should move slower. He's just like making passes with it to then run through.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so much of this movie I think makes more sense when you think that it's like a 19-year-old's like playground.
Yeah.
Well, I read something that like he essentially wanted to use very small, simple sets, but just go full out with costumes, and that they said no, and that he had to use like legit sets for it.
Yeah.
Is there any other context?
And then he's just like, all right, well then if I can't do small sets, I will do the biggest sets imaginable.
Yeah.
There's this quote I saw on the Wikipedia page from Neil Jordan, who a few years after this makes Interview with a Vampire. And he's talking about how, this is to this day, I saw someone say this is like the most acclaimed Dracula vampire movie ever made, if only because it's the only one to have won multiple Oscars, if not a single Oscar. Yeah. But something Neil Jordan said about this movie was like, he said that this movie inspired him to make Interview with a Vampire because it was the first time he had ever seen a vampire movie that was high art and high studio level filmmaking, and not just like some cheap, janky European production. Which is funny because I watched this movie and I'm like, this is Coppola's love letter to cheap, janky European vampire movies of the 60s and 70s, down to these like cavernous, massive sets that are obviously so much more detailed than like a Mario Bava movie would have, but like exist in this state of like otherworldliness that you get from lower rent soundstage filmmaking, right?
Yes.
Like nothing in this movie feels like a real location.
And something that I love about what he's doing with the movie is each location that the movie set in does feel like an homage almost to a different type of filmmaking.
Yes.
Because this opening does really feel like a 1923 period medieval Crusades movie.
Yes. Yeah. But also the best version of John Borman's Excalibur at the same time.
Like it feels like one of those movies.
And then it becomes a shadow play.
Yeah, because it's straight up, it like has like the shadow illustrations against just an orange backdrop. You're having he does the impalations on the spikes all through silhouette. Dracula's lit in this incredible way in which obviously he's just like up against a stage wall that they've painted orange and they just blasted a light at.
Yeah.
But it never fails to affect you. Despite the fact that you can feel the artificiality, that's part of the charm and the joy of it.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen One from the Heart?
A long time ago.
Okay. Do you know One from the Heart, Stuart?
Nope.
One from the Heart is like, it is the last. So if we talk about Francis Ford Coppola as a filmmaker, right? We're thinking like, he starts off making like exploitation movies in the 60s. And then he kind of becomes the like biggest director in Hollywood through the 70s. And then he has this very dramatic like career collapse. Kind of spends the 80s in the wanderlust and then kind of peaks back up in the 90s with this like weird tension between his own art film desires and kind of studio sellout projects that kind of rides out the rest of his career. So One from the Heart is the movie that like kills that like golden period for him because it is such a colossal bomb. But what it is that he wanted to shoot the movie set in the Las Vegas Strip, and he decided to rebuild the Las Vegas Strip in sound stages rather than just shoot it there, not for cost purposes, but because he just liked the idea of it just feeling like a little pristine and hermetic and otherworldly.
Yeah.
And like not like he didn't want location shooting. And he like bankrupted United Artists doing
my
this.
God.
So to some degree, I'm like, I watched this movie and I'm like, oh, he's getting to be back at the scale that he was at when he was like making Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
And he's like indulging
He's
in
relishing.
all his pet, like just getting to just throw money at the screen and like never concede to anything outside the like dream space he's built for himself.
And
This movie rules.
on the topic of dreams, there's a very
How deep
loose.
are we? We're an hour. We're good.
Yeah.
We're doing great.
Oh no, we
Doing
got so much time, but I gotta get us to the important thing we have to talk about.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it.
We have to.
But I don't
we
want to talk
simply
about it.
have to
Are
talk
we
about it.
gonna settle the issue?
We
after
have to
30
settle
years?
the issue.
Because I'll settle it.
We have to settle it.
I'll settle it.
But so we're introduced to Vlad the Impaler, Dracula, who
Gary
is
Oldman, yeah.
betroothed to, what is her name in this time period?
Elisabetta.
Elisabetta, his life's love, his pursuit, who is waiting for him in Castle Dracula for when he returns from his conquest against.
They're like the Turks, right? Like
Yeah.
the Turks are invading or something, and he needs to like fight them off.
I do want to quickly say, I think I said this to Becca when we watched the movie together. I said the coolest thing ever is that this movie about Dracula, mostly set in Victorian London, starts with 1462, Constantinople has fallen. And I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Like it starts with like a brief history lesson of the fall of Constantinople.
And like the fact that he's like a Christian crusader to start off, I was already kind of like the
Do you think?
fallen Knight of Christ basically figure. I was hooting and hollering in that one.
Do you think anyone has ever told Ridley Scott that he should make a Dracula origin story?
He should.
Because I know that would be the
should.
worst movie ever made, but that feels like the sort of dumb bullshit he'd do.
That feels like a Ridley Scott movie.
Yeah.
I like that his next movie is just called Bomb.
If he did something like that, do you think it would be like just the origins, or do you think it'd be another like similar scope of this, where like we're gonna briefly talk about it and then it's back to Victorian era?
Just to
London?
clarify, you're asking me if Ridley Scott would just tell a small portion of the story with the possibility that he would make sequels later if the movie did not bomb?
So
Just to clarify, that's your question.
But you're getting to the point of the question as well.
Yeah.
Because if Ridley Scott does make this movie, I want him to stay in
that's what
Crusader
I'm saying.
time
No, that's what I'm
period.
saying. I see this as like Prometheus or Robin Hood, where Ridley
Yes.
Scott's like, well, this is the first part of a trilogy, and like
Yeah.
and like it bombs. But yes, he does just make the origin film that ends with Dracula renouncing Christ.
Yes.
It's the I can't
Okay,
believe
there we
he
go.
spoke that into existence.
Yep, we did.
He should do it.
It's out
He
there.
should not. He
It's
should
in
die.
the ether.
He should do it.
He should die is what he should
In
do.
the
The wrong Scott brother jumped off that bridge.
Speaking of jumping off
I
of
said I was going to be good on this one.
You were doing so
I was
great.
doing so well.
You were doing
So-
so great, Cole.
Speaking of
for the first hour.
Speaking of jumping off of tall objects, so Dracula he gets a notification that Elisabetta he gets a notification that Elisabetta that a Turk shot an arrow into the castle. That said on it, Dracula's dead, LOL, and that she jumped from the tower in her grief and is dead. So
I am going to switch seats with you.
So he rides home as the score is just swelling, just oh, It's like, what's- and he rides back to the castle and he screams over her body in his flesh armor.
And somewhere George Lucas is like, I have an idea.
I'm actually going to bring him up later.
Okay.
Because they had to reshoot the end of this movie because of him.
Sure.
Wait, what?
George, he's always there.
They had to reshoot the end of this movie because
Sophia
of George.
Coppola's in The Phantom Menace?
Yeah.
She got nominated for a Razzie for it.
Phantom Menace?
Yeah.
For
Because
Phantom Menace,
Yes.
not really.
yeah, she got nominated for Phantom Menace because they're like, her performance in Godfather 3 was so bad, we're going to nominate her again.
That's great.
I fucking hate
She
the Razzies.
she plays one of the handmaidens.
Can I say this?
Yeah.
I know that this movie was a big hit.
Yes.
I know this movie got won some Oscars. I know it was generally very well liked,
Yeah.
with a few exceptions. I am a little shocked that it got 0 Razzie nominations, given that the exceptions to the criticism, the like positive criticism, are Razzie fucking bait. right?
yeah.
Like that is the sort of thing the Razzies would go for.
Yeah.
Is what Jeff's about to talk about.
This has the big energy of movie that gets nominated for 10 Oscars and 4 Razzies.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, I'm surprised that Keanu and Winona were not nominated for the Razzies.
Okay, so he rides back and he screams into the air and he renounces Christ and he stabs the crucifix and blood starts pouring out.
So this is we were kind of touching on this, Jeff, while you stepped away.
Yeah.
But I was talking about how in the novel Dracula's more of like a monster pretending to be a human.
Yeah.
The whole like satanic, like I've renounced Christ and that's why I'm this creature, is I don't believe a thing in the book.
Yeah.
Right? That like
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense why it would not be in the book.
this idea that it's almost like, you know, Puritan era ideas of witchcraft.
Yeah,
That you
right.
like give yourself to Satan and become this like monstrous creature
Yeah.
that preys on
Yeah.
good Christian folk.
Right.
Which is why I think this movie is so interesting in its titling of Bram Stoker's Dracula, right? Because that implicitly promises like a more faithful adaptation. And there's a bunch of shit in this movie that is like lifted straight from the book that does not make it into most adaptations. But like incidental details and stuff and like plot beats. But bigger picture conceptually, this is a very faithless interpretation of Dracula the character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is much more almost in line with the Christopher Lee take of Dracula and Lestat in a lot of ways, right?
Yes.
That like who's the writer again? He's a bad screenwriter. I was looking at his other credits.
James Hart.
Yeah, he wrote the worst movie ever made right before writing this.
Are you
What's the worst?
are you referring to Hook?
I'm referring to Hook.
Oh, fuck off.
That movie's awful.
Okay, you know what's funny about
Can I be on that?
Nope.
You know what's funny?
say
Okay.
that.
Okay. Wait, I need to talk about this man's career right
know,
now.
it's insane.
I'm gonna just
It's
Stuart,
insane.
I'm gonna just hit you with what James Hart has written. I'm only gonna read off the big ones. Stuart, Stuart, you're not prepared for what the fourth or fifth one of these is gonna be.
All right.
It's he wrote Hook, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yay.
He then produces Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. He then
Which is a
writes
knockoff of this.
He then writes Muppet Treasure Island.
Yep.
Then he writes Contact. He writes
Jesus Christ wrote Contact. Let's be very clear. That's a WJ arbitration.
he writes
Fuck up.
Tuck Everlasting.
Yep.
He then writes a treatment for Lara Croft Tomb Raider, which he does not get screenplay credit for. But when they go back and they make a sequel, Lara Croft Tomb Raider, the Cradle of Life, he gets credited for writing that one, even though he didn't write it. He then writes Sahara, August Rush, Epic, and then The Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Well,
He gets a off-screen additional literary material.
but I
credit.
don't think he's credited in the credits. I don't remember that. It's a weird one. That's a weird.
It's just really weird career. The Muppet Treasure Island of it all throws me off.
Epic is one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen in my life. it's not good.
It's about like a twig, right?
Okay, the thing about Epic is like it has been months since I watched Epic and since we recorded that episode. Though I think it went out last week as you're hearing this, listeners. I still don't understand if the protagonist of Epic is meant to be a literal leaf or not. Because he looks like a person, but the dialogue indicates that I'm meant to think that this is like a leaf you would find on a tree who's like sentient. Weird movie.
Weird movie.
Stuart, this is the Epic we are referring to. It's about people who live. Yeah.
Because
Not
everyone in that movie is tiny, and most of them are either like small forest animals or like sentient pebbles, right? Sentient like blades of grass.
Yeah.
And then there's this like race of like tiny humans who live there, and they keep calling them leaves. And I'm like, is it a metaphor, or is it just like they didn't want to animate all the protagonists as leaves?
So Dracula, he renounces the Christian God.
Yep.
I think it's very telling. I don't think he ever says Satan or like specifically refers to the concept of Satan.
Right.
It's just a renunciation of
Yeah.
the Christian God.
Yeah.
And then he drinks the blood. He becomes a vampire. The title card pops up. Just this like incredible like written, like carved into stone.
It's not an optical effect, right?
Yeah.
Like that's part of it is that you're looking at this and you're so used to seeing title cards that are like designed in post-production, but this is like a literal physical object that you can
they had to make.
You can see that they are lighting with torchlight, right? That you can see the shading on it. It's such a declaration of purpose of this movie, even if it kind of looks ugly. It's cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. I think then it's Renfield, right? Renfield's the next thing. We jump like 500 years in the future.
Yeah, so every adaptation of Dracula is like, what do we do with Renfield? Because he's like so weirdly superfluous to the plot, but is like
essential
one of the most iconic things. So every adaptation of Dracula, there are movies about Dracula, there are adaptations of the novel, right? Those are two different things. We're talking about adaptations of the novel. They always like want to try to make Renfield more like connected to the Harkers in some way. So in this case, which is not true in the novel, he is like Jonathan's boss or the previous he's the previous lawyer who was handling Dracula's affairs, who has now gone crazy and Jonathan needs to take over the account of. Which is not what happens in the novel. He's just a guy Dracula met at one point.
It's kind of a smart way to play around it, because if this movie's very interested in Dracula's like grand scheme to get Mina,
yes,
it is smart that he's like, I will find a person who works at this law firm.
But he doesn't know that yet.
He doesn't?
He doesn't know that yet.
I thought he was aware that.
No,
Mina,
I think he's just looking for people, and he doesn't clock it till he sees her.
Okay,
because this whole thing.
That's how I interpret.
Yeah, his whole game changes when he sees Mina, right?
Okay.
Like because he's fucking Lucy.
So wait, what was Renfield's whole plan with Dracula? Just to get people?
Literally, yeah. I think it's just because in the novel, it's just like this creature has fed on Transylvania enough, and he wants to just come to London.
Yeah.
And where there are good Christians he can feed upon, right? Yeah. And it's literally just that he's just hired the Harkers to like buy the land, right? So he can like be prepared to relocate to London.
Okay. Mina's not a part of his plan yet.
No, in the novel, Mina only matters to the plan in that she is like a tool he can use to get at the fucking Scooby Gang.
So the Elizabetha thing is an invention of this movie.
The Elizabetha thing is an invention of this movie.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there may be, I am sure there is a Dracula film or story
with a similar
in the
idea.
100 years between the novel and this movie that has a similar idea.
Yeah.
It is not, unless I am missing something or misremembering the ending, a part of the novel.
But we meet Renfield, played by Tom Waits. Just like an incredible choice. This is our second Tom Waits discussion.
Tom Waits, not really an actor, acts a fair amount, not necessarily most iconic for this, but Coppola is the director he works with the most.
Yeah.
It's the only guy he's ever really worked with twice, well, except for Jarmusch.
Yeah.
But he's been in like 5 or 6 Coppola movies over the years.
We love him.
We love him. Yeah. He's great.
We were talking about this when we did our Night on Earth episode, because Tom Waits does all the inner songs for that movie. And it's just so funny. But I watched Licorice Pizza again recently, just like one of the great.
Fucking Holden.
I think about him and Licorice Pizza like it's like him and Licorice Pizza and David Lynch and The Fabelmans are the two guys as like directors in a movie from recent years that I just like recite the lines in my head.
One of those performances is good. One of those performances is bad.
Both are great.
Which one's bad?
Lynch is bad.
No.
Where's the horizon?
It's
Anyway. Renfield is just like, my master's coming. Yes, he's coming, and you're not ready. And he's in an asylum.
Can I say, I love Tom Waits. Given how much this topic is a minefield for this movie, his accent's not good either.
Yeah,
and he doesn't get any shit for his accent. I'm just gonna put that out.
Because he's at least really funny. I mean,
he's great.
He's so good.
He's in it a lot. He's in it more than you'd think he would be too, given that he never leaves the one room.
Yeah, but you just keep coming back to that one room. And he kind of has a whole arc where he turns against Dracula at the end.
Yeah, that doesn't really add up too much.
Yeah.
I kind of think the script is a bit of a mess.
It's a mess, but the way Coppola just kind of like charms his whole way through it.
I was not surprised to see that this guy is mostly like a hack who wrote one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Which again is Hook, which is a terrible movie. Just one of the worst things ever.
We're trying to provoke him.
I'm not. I just want to get that on the record that Hook is like should have ended Steven Spielberg's career. Like nothing Steven Spielberg has done since has made up for how bad Hook is. And that man made The Post.
He did make The Post, which is
He made
great.
the fucking Post.
But now
I'm not engaging.
I'm sorry, but we do have to talk about it now.
Okay.
Because the next scene we cut to is... Stuart, what do you have pulled up?
Nothing. Keep going.
We do have...
Is that Hook fan fiction?
Because the next thing that happens is we cut to a train car.
Yes.
Where we meet Keanu Reeves playing Jonathan Harker, who is riding his way to Castle Dracula. And we get the first Keanu narration, which I presume is pulled right from the book. It's ish.
Well, it's just so much more fucking verbose in the book.
And it's just like, darling, thinking of Mina tonight. And so the question I have to ask, Stuart Cole, Keanu.
Yes.
That's the question.
That's not a question.
That's the question.
That's not a question.
Hi, Stuart. What
What do we think of Keanu in this
what
movie?
do we think of Keanu in this movie? Okay.
I mean, he says it himself in future interviews that he didn't like his performance in this movie. So, like, I'm inclined to agree with him.
Keanu Reeves is one of my favorite actors
Okay, but
of all time. And, you know,
you got to finish the sentence, Cole.
it's several sentences.
It's a runoff.
Let me just get here.
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves has been one of my favorite actors of all time for a long time. Like, well before the, like, Keanu comeback that has, like, defined the past 10 years, right?
A respectable position, by the way.
I liked Keanu when it was not cool to like Keanu. So I spent a lot of time defending the Keanu thing. And eventually when you're defending Keanu, some asshole brings up this movie. And I think for a long time, I still tried to like tie myself in knots to defend this performance. He's bad in this movie. It's a bad performance.
You didn't finish the full sentence.
What's the full sentence?
Which is Keanu is among a lot of people's favorite actors.
Yes.
Of course. But he's a bad actor.
No!
Like,
he's an incredible actor.
No, he's not.
Have you seen Speed?
Yes.
I rest my case.
No, listen.
Could you do that?
I'm sure, any Tom Cruise could have done that.
I'm sorry. Sorry. You're just saying that, Keanu's not a good actor because he gives performances on the level of the most talented person to ever be captured on camera.
Can I say
one of the greatest actors of all time?
Here's what I'm saying. Like I think Hook is not a bad movie.
You're wrong.
You can, but I could still enjoy it. You can think that Keanu is one of your favorite actors, but we do have to acknowledge that he ain't
my own private Idaho.
Cool.
Can I quickly say something?
Sure.
So Stuart doesn't think Keanu's a good actor, doesn't like him in this movie.
Oh
Correct?
God.
Listen. I'm not like this.
Do you think he's good in this movie?
This isn't a hill I'm willing to die on. Like, I can be convinced, but just from
all
what
hills should be ones you're willing to die on. That's how you properly record a podcast.
But I will
just pick
say,
an opinion and defend it.
I did not care much for his screen time in this movie.
So Stuart doesn't think Keanu's a good actor, dislikes him in this movie. Cole thinks Keanu's a great actor, dislikes him in this movie. Jeff likes Keanu as an actor and likes Keanu in this movie.
But you're wrong.
I'm going to defend what Keanu's doing here.
What is going on? What is happening?
Have you seen Something's Gotta Give?
No.
See, this is the problem.
But I've seen The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Well, I haven't seen The Day the Earth Stood Still. Have you seen fucking John Wick 2?
Yes.
Have
you seen John Wick 3?
Yeah, he's really fucking good in John Wick 3.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back. Like,
That's John Wick 1. And he's great in John Wick 1.
No, it's John Wick 3.
It's John Wick 1.
It's John Wick 1.
No, where's the one where he gets shot off the fucking hotel?
That's John Wick
That's
3.
3.
Yeah, and he says the same thing.
Does he say it again?
No.
No, Lawrence Fishburne's like, you pissed, John? He's like,
Yeah. That's it. That's
Great.
the John Wick.
He's
timeline.
great.
Okay, sorry.
Have you seen Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure?
Yeah.
Have you seen Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey?
It's in the Matrix Resurrection.
Have you seen Bill and Ted Face the Music? Have you seen Freaked?
Yes.
So good in Freaked.
I
You
don't
forget he's in
deny
Freaks.
that Keanu. I'm like, listen.
Have you seen Man of Tai Chi, his directorial debut? He's incredible in.
I don't tell people to not like Keanu because he's a bad actor. Because I understand, like, there's a lot of actors who aren't particularly good actors, but they just have that amazing screen appeal. I would love to have a beer with Keanu, with Keanu, or literally go watch one of his movies with him and he'd talk about his experiences. Like, I bet those are all great experiences. But if I were to like if I had a script in front of me and I had to cast like a leading man for like a Dracula role, I'm sorry, but they should have casted Johnny Depp, which they almost did.
I would walk off a fucking bridge if Johnny Depp circa 1992 was in this movie is demonstrably worse.
No, it's not.
Because he's annoying.
it's not.
Keanu's kind of ignorable. Depp would be fucking...
Can I defend Keanu in this movie?
Yes.
Okay. So here's the thing. I'm not quite convinced Keanu is intentionally good in this movie. But I do
See, this
think
is what I used to say.
He's good. Because if this movie is so much centered on the Mina Elizabeta and Dracula relationship, Jonathan Harker is basically presented in this movie as like the ultimate cuck.
Yes.
Just about to say that.
Jesus Christ. This is what I used to say about this movie.
And he is playing the ultimate cuck.
And he's kind of giving the best cuck performance ever put to screen.
No, he's not. Because Richard E. Grant is in this movie.
You're right. He is giving the better cuck performance.
What if Richard E. Grant plays Jonathan Harker?
If Richard E. Grant plays Jonathan Harker, I think it's better, but I still think I like what Keanu's doing here.
I agree. I agree with you.
He's not doing anything. That's the problem. He is adrift in this movie. He doesn't have a take on the character.
Yeah.
He has an attempted take on the accent. And Coppola himself said this, was like, Coppola said, like,
he needed a heartthrob.
I love Keanu. Well, no, he said that, but he also said, like, I loved Keanu. I loved working with Keanu. He's a great actor. But he was so concerned with the accent that, like, he never loosened up.
Yeah.
And there's nothing. And he was so concerned with the accent that he never started acting. And Coppola said that in the context that was my fault. Because that's my job to, like, fix that. But, like, I know Jonathan Harker like sucks as a character and is boring.
That's also very true.
But
how do you make that character interesting?
I mean,
Richard E. Grant.
Okay,
Becca.
So, folks, I'm gonna come here. I'm bringing in an impartial opinion.
I know what she's
former
gonna say.
guest of the show, Becca, is gonna tune in. I have two questions for you. Is Keanu Reeves a good actor? And is Keanu Reeves good in Bram Stoker's Dracula? Take it away.
Yes and no.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I needed.
That was the
Do you have
correct
anything else you want to add to it, or okay?
That was
All
the
right,
correct
good.
answer, Becca. Thank you.
Thank you. Mine was yes and yes. Stuart's no and no. Cole is yes and no. You guys
Let's
are
go, baby.
Becca, before you go, I wanted to clarify. Like, I think Keanu Reeves is a bad actor in the same way. I'm trying to think, like, in the same way, I don't know, any like actor who's likable but not talented.
What does that mean?
I'm trying to think.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Name.
Well,
someone.
like there's like went to acting school at Juilliard and like did Shakespeare, Richard III actor, and then there's actors that they're not really like a trained like thespian like actor, but you just like them.
But why is one better than the other?
I'm not saying.
But you are saying that.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying like he's not a good actor.
He is a good actor.
No, he's not a good actor.
He is.
People dislike him.
He's in a narrow alley of actors.
Why do people like him?
Because he's a cool dude.
How do you know he's a cool dude?
You don't.
You ever met him?
You don't.
So what's giving you that perception?
It's not my perception.
It is your
it's
perception.
how everybody else perceives him.
But why do they think that?
Just the movies he's in.
What about those movies gives people that perception?
Because he's cool enough.
Because he's a good actor.
He's cool in them.
So you're paying people like the acting that he's doing on screen.
Here's one, and I have to very preface this because I'm sitting next to a Sylvester Stallone fan here.
Stallone is an okay actor.
Okay, but why do people like him before some of his later
because of the good performances he gives.
good performances, or is that he's cool in the movie?
He's great in Rocky.
They like the good performances. They like Rocky and they like the first Rambo, and they're willing to tolerate the annoying bullshit that he does. Also, to be clear, Stallone is a good actor who doesn't understand why he's a good actor and frequently gets in his own way. Like, that's Stallone's problem, is that Stallone is one kind of good actor and he wants to be a second kind of good actor, and the kind of good actor he wants to be, he's not good at being. Like, Stallone should never be in conversation with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is a better actor at that thing.
Stallone is great in Rocky and Creed.
And Rambo 1.
And Rambo 1.
Yeah.
And Copland?
Yeah, I don't like Copland, but he's good in Copland.
Like he's good playing low status.
Yeah, he's good. He is a good, actor, dramatic leading man,
I
right?
would argue the same thing for
He's a
Keanu.
bad
I would say
action
Keanu's good at very certain things, but not good at others. And like Dracula, he's not good at this.
But he's, here's the thing that everyone dodges when they're talking about Keanu being bad in this. Because a thing people often say is, well, it's just bad casting, right? Like, what are you expecting? He's not in the movie much. He is good in Dangerous Liaisons, which is also a costume drama from 6 years earlier, a Stephen Frears movie. He's good in Dangerous Liaisons. Now, is he the lead of Dangerous Liaisons? I mean, he's not the lead of this, but that character is ostensibly the lead, right? But here's the thing: everything you could point at towards Keanu's just miscast in this movie, I think you can also point at Winona. And Winona did get a lot of that shit when this movie came out, which I think is undeserved. But casting is casting is casting. Keanu Reeves does in fact have range, can handle a lot of stuff. The problem here is that he doesn't have a take on the character. So as an actor, he's not doing what he needs to be doing as an actor. It's not that they just slotted the Keanu Reeves persona incorrectly into this movie. It is in fact that he is not doing the work he needs to do because he is a good actor, and I'm expecting him to be good in this movie.
Here's the thing is, I think I would argue he's not miscast in this movie.
I kind of agree.
I think Coppola wants you to spend this first 20-ish minutes of this movie kind of trapped with the most boring guy ever, being haunted by the most interesting guy ever. And then they're quickly going to get rid of the boring guy for an hour and send the interesting guy to London to hang out with the love interest, the protagonist of the movie.
The problem is that there is, in fact, interesting, boring, and boring. And
I
do think at the end of the day, for instance, I will say this: Winona is doing interesting, boring in this movie. Winona is playing a boring character. This is my, he just passed away recently, but have you guys seen Barry Lyndon?
Yes.
Yeah.
I get into arguments with a lot of people because this is another case of contentious lead actor casting, right? In Barry Lyndon, Ryan O'Neal, right? And when people defend the disastrous Ryan O'Neal performance in Barry Lyndon, they often like to say, well, he's supposed to be like a boring pill. And what I always say when people say that is, A, no, he's not. Literally, that is not what that character is. And B, I have seen Ryan O'Neal give the good version of that performance. Because that is what Ryan O'Neal is doing in What's Up, Doc, which is an extraordinary performance, where he's playing this dumb, irritating drip that you're kind of sick of. Yeah. And then you watch him in Barry Lyndon, and he's wooden and bad and lost. And I think that's the distinction between what Winona is doing in this and what Keanu is doing in this. Yeah. They're both supposed to be playing drab Victorian nobodies, right? Middle-class functionaries. But Winona has a take on what that means, and Keanu, I think, doesn't, because he's so again, Coppola said it. he is putting all his effort into trying to get the accent.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't even think the accent is as bad as people say it is. It's that the performance is bad.
I didn't think the accent was actually that bad.
There is a tab on the Wikipedia page about the accent. That is like how widely reviled
my
the
God.
accent is. It is
think
like
it was
like
that bad.
Oh my God. Reception, critical response, Reeves's performance.
like this is like I feel like the like consensus first ballot Hall of Famer bad British accent in a movie.
Well, listen, we covered a whole season of John Travolta.
I know.
And an episode where he tries to put on a British
Oh
accent.
my God, which one?
Basement's the dumb waiter.
Basement's the
Oh,
dumb
he
waiter.
does. You guys were so disrespectful.
Oh,
to
we
that,
just
by
we
the
just
way.
robbed the bank, guy.
Can I just say that you guys were so disrespectful to the dumb waiter?
Cool.
I don't think so.
You just like
I-
poo-pooed it out of hand as if it's not based on one of like the greatest plays
The
of the 20th century.
the problem with that movie is that the only way we could watch it was in like 240p, and it was borderline unhearable.
I just need to like defend. Like you guys walked into the start of the episode, you're like, this is some dumb bullshit that we don't want to cover, and I'm sitting here being like, this is like one of the most important and like great works of theater of the 20th century. Like even if the adaptation is bad, you guys need to like understand like the import of this text of the play.
Hi, Stuart.
Is that President Bill Clinton?
Former president. Also a vampire?
All right, we got to go. We got to go.
So he gets to Castle Dracula after this incredible train sequence with all these
I
like
love the train sequence.
like the eyes of Dracula out the window as he mentions him in the
So-
text.
Can I tell you something, Stuart?
Yeah.
That shot right at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Where there's the book
Yeah.
and then the train
Yeah.
driving over.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what you're actually looking at? You are looking at a model train on top of a giant book that they built.
No.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is some perspective stuff shot, but I believe that like
It is a massive book.
the
that's cool.
book is like
Massive.
yay big, so they could lay the train on top of it. And then
that's so
there's literally
cool.
just like a lighting trick to like make the train fade in.
Trains in
Oh,
silhouette.
that's so cool.
Yeah.
It's like that.
I love all the transitions.
It's like that
that's-
shot from
yeah.
Lord of the Rings where you always see that massive ring from,
Yeah.
so they could get the reflections in it.
Have you
Yeah.
ever seen Detour? The Edward G. Olmos?
No.
Oh, there's like a weird like forced perspective shot in that movie of like a guy sitting in a diner and like the coffee cup is like exaggeratedly large in the foreground because it's a forced perspective shot, but it's actually not a forced perspective shot. They just built a giant coffee cup to make it look like a weird forced perspective shot.
To the
It's
point
so
of Christopher Reeve's performance, there's something
Keanu.
that I wanted to say about this
Christopher Reeve.
Keanu Reeve's performance. sorry.
Rest in
An
peace.
actor who is good in many of the ways that Keanu is good, though.
At what he's good at.
At a lot of things,
Limited things.
but mostly knowing the instrument. Keanu knows his instrument.
It's an instrument with a couple notes.
And it has a wine ring. Oh,
Listen,
Stuart,
listen.
Stuart,
When
there
you
are only 8 notes. There are only 8 notes. If you want to take this
Folks,
music,
I need you to pause for 1 second. Okay. I need you to pause for 1 second. Former guest of the show, Mark Tilley, tuning in. Mark, I have 2 questions for you. Okay, here they are. Is Keanu Reeves a good actor? And is he good in Bram Stoker's Dracula?
I've not seen Bram Stoker's Dracula, but he's a fantastic actor. He's never been bad. I can't imagine him being bad in anything.
Okay, this is what we needed from you.
well, that doesn't actually. First of all, it's not a tie, to be clear, because you brought in the tiebreaker and she weighed in. So,
Yeah.
like, one of us is in fact winning this argument. And secondly, that doesn't answer the pertinent question here.
Mark, thank you for your service. All right.
My point I was going to make is, like, I love the train scene because, like, it is essentially like he's on a train ride to hell, basically, which is great. But the scene could have been even more elevated if, in the words you even said, Cole Bradley, a good, boring performance.
No, he's bad in this movie.
Yeah, it would have been even better to know it's like this clueless, dumb, like just totally self-absorbed guy has no idea that he's entering into hell. But I don't read
Yeah.
that from Keanu
No,
in that.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm fully on board with he is really bad in this movie.
Yeah.
I'm literally just like having the thought like the good version of this performance is like
is we're awing in the beauty of the shot.
Mark Hamill in the Star Wars trilogy, right? Like kind of playing an annoying drift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can do that well is the point I'm making, Jeffrey.
Yes.
Keanu,
I'm mostly in agreement with you about Keanu.
you think this performance is good?
Yeah, Keanu.
Okay, there's one other thing I just want to touch on while we're talking about Keanu. And it technically pops up later, but the wig.
Yeah.
Can we bring back the hair ranking?
I don't have the music with me.
Start
but-
a new list and just put Keanu in this movie in last place. Because it is like the worst wig I've ever seen.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. I think we should have a segment
Yes.
because, Cole, you're guesting on 4 Winonas,
Yes, I am.
and they are the 4 Keanu Reeves movies.
This is true.
Whoa. Was that intentional?
Kind of.
Okay.
He already wanted to cover 2
So
of them.
let me get this out because she has worked with Keanu Reeves 4 times,
Yes.
and it is like the weirdly like the primary like collaboration I think she's had, even
Yeah.
if a lot of people don't think of it that way because 3 of those movies are very obscure.
Sure.
I do want to actually address this because I don't want it to come across as I think you guys picked the wrong person to do a show about. I actually think that I'm picking the other actor, right? I think Winona is a great topic and a really interesting topic. What it really came down to is I always want to be on, my gut instinct is always to go for the best movie. And so when Jeff said Winona Ryder, I kind of threw out 3 titles. And he said one of them was taken. And then I was like, and then the other 2, I kind of realized after throwing them out, I was like, oh, Keanu's in both of those. And then I was like, I also really like Destination Wedding. Maybe I want to just like complete the hat trick and do the 3 Keanus. And then like a few months ago, Jeff's like, did you know there's a 4th Keanu collaboration? And I'm like, well.
I guess you got it. Which is like Cole's going to be on the private life of Pippa
I've never seen that movie, but I
Pippa
guess
P.
I'm doing it because I love a
We're
bit.
What's the
getting-
4th one?
We're getting Pippa Lee pilled.
Private Life of Pippa Lee. And then they did Destination Wedding a few years ago, which is an insane movie.
Wait, what's the second one though after this?
Scanner Darkly.
What?
A Scanner Darkly.
Oh, okay.
That's more of a Keanu movie that she like pops up in.
Okay. Okay.
Where there's this Destination Wedding is a straight up 2-hander. I have no fucking idea about Pippa Lee.
But I'm saying while we know that you're going to be on the 4 Keanus.
I am going to be on the 4 Keanus.
We should have the Keanu hair ranking
Oh fuck.
for the 4 of them.
That's going to be complicated.
We're entering the
So I get to do this. I get to do this. This
I
is
think
my
you get
list.
to do it.
This is going to be complicated when we get to A Scanner Darkly for plot reasons in A Scanner Darkly, actually.
Music was so fucking good.
Did you plan that?
I had that saved for a while.
That's the new Keanu hair ranking.
This is last place.
Okay.
Okay.
And
It's also first place as of now.
no, philosophically, I'm thinking of it as last. Well, now my question, my thought is that, you know, Stuart, you have in the past, I think, if there's like 2 hairstyles, you've split them up, right?
Yes.
Oh, the categories and ranking them?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a sexiness in the storytelling.
No, but I mean, like if someone has like a dramatic hair change.
Like
over
you
the
gave
course of
2
the movie.
ratings for Swordfish
Yeah,
because
like
he has
there's
the
the
long
2
hair.
Swordfish.
Oh, yes.
And I don't necessarily know that I want to do that for this, even though Keanu does have 2 distinct hairstyles in this movie.
Well, because we all know
Because
that
the second one's so bad.
the first place pick of the Travolting hair ranking was the biker flashback
No,
of Life on the Line.
It was Taking It Upon 1, 2, 3.
No.
We talked about this.
And was
It
it?
Taking It Upon 1,
The list
2,
got
3.
published already, Cole, so I don't know what you're even talking about.
Jeff, I need you to issue a correction.
Retraction.
All
no,
right.
last place.
All right, guys. Boots coming down. We got to talk about the movie.
Boots coming down. Okay.
Boots coming down.
So we're actually going to introduce Dracula. So
I don't have to leave for 3 hours. So it's fine.
I have a hard out at 2:30.
Oh, well, we're fucked.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he gets to Castle Dracula.
We can
Where
just finish the episode without you. I can hit the off button.
where he enters Keanu gets to the castle, and we have this great section where there's like all this supernatural energy around him.
Mm-hmm.
The wolves are all following his cart. There's like a ghostly conductor whose arm is extended. It's so fucking cool.
Cool.
He passes through like a ring of fire to enter the castle. It's all great. He gets there and he enters through the front door, and that's
freely
when
and of his own will.
Freely and of his own will, and that's when we finally are introduced to Dracula.
Dracula.
Yes,
I don't.
Who's old as hell.
played by Gary Oldman, old as hell. This is probably the most iconic design in this movie is what Dracula looks like.
Old Dracula in particular.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's funny because he really isn't in that look for that much of the movie.
I mean, I think in general, the like opening chunk of Dracula is the most iconic part of Dracula. It's the only fucking thing anyone remembers from the Todd Browning movie.
Like this Dracula look isn't even on the. I mean, it is on the poster, but it's like there.
Yeah, but that's a later poster, I think.
Yeah.
I thought this when I was watching this late last night, that if this was the entire movie, I would like 12 out of 10 because I just love the vibes.
Yeah.
I love the set. I love his costume. I love his look.
You love Monica Bellucci.
Monica Bellucci. And I love.
I had another Monica Bellucci dream.
Just the horror movie of like a banker fuck just roaming around in Dracula's castle while Gary Oldman's crawling on all fours. I was like, give me 3 hours of that.
Man, Oldman's having
so much fun.
Much fun.
Yes.
In this
yes.
movie.
Like, it's okay that it goes to London and he becomes younger and a whole Mina thing. Like, that's fine. It's all good. But I could have taken 3 hours of just this.
Yeah.
The two things I want to say about Oldman, and three things actually.
Oldman?
No, I want to say, firstly, that Gary Oldman's main incentive to do this movie
Yeah, I know what you're about to say.
was he wanted to work with Coppola, but he
And?
also wanted to say the line, I've crossed oceans of time to find you.
God, who are you?
That's what I brought up, was the clip.
I know you.
I have crossed oceans of time to find you.
One of the greatest line
You
deliveries.
could tell, too, because he just fucking makes a meal
But he
of it.
apparently
Yeah.
was so attracted by that line that it's a major incentive for him to be in the
I
movie.
totally get it. I would want to say that too, right? You read that line and you're kind of like struck by it. Where is he in his career? Because I feel like the 1, 2, 3 punch of this, True Romance the next year, and Leon the Professional the year after are like the real things that like kickstart his career. But obviously he is also in Sid and Nancy, but that's 6 years earlier. And I guess I don't have a good sense of what's going on between Sid and Nancy and him coming over to Hollywood.
Well, he just gets off JFK the year before, where he plays
Oh
Lee
fuck!
Harvey
Of
Oswald.
course he's in JFK.
He's playing Lee
good
Harvey
in
Oswald.
JFK, man.
Cole, if I told you what I'm doing for President's Day this year,
What?
I'm watching the Stone Presidents trilogy. I'm going to watch JFK.
Can I come over?
You want to come over?
Are
I want
all
to watch
12
JFK, Nixon,
hours?
and W.
Are you? Oh shit! I'm so sorry. Are you watching the director's cuts like a big boy?
Yes, because those are the only versions available in 4K.
Yeah, they are. Is that correct?
Yeah. Okay, but that's my plan. But
So good.
Oldman's so good in this movie.
Yeah.
He's incredible in this section, and Winona and him had some conflicts on set.
Yeah.
Gary Oldman was difficult to work with. Gary Oldman was
Apparently,
difficult to work with.
The story of this movie is that they got along incredibly well before production and for the beginning of production, but that he's one of those guys who stays in like the he stayed in character as Dracula for the whole day. And that the second they started like getting into the meat of the production, she and him immediately had a 180 flip, and that they just did not get along. She like borderline didn't want to do scenes with him.
I feel like she also didn't get along with Daniel Day-Lewis on Age of Innocence. Don't quote me on that. I just feel like I've heard that.
Which is
somewhere.
interesting because they work together again in The Crucible.
This is true. Maybe it's the Crucible where they didn't get along.
Yeah, the
I
Crucible.
think
That would
that
make sense.
I've heard that.
Yeah,
about the
that's
Crucible.
what I think I've heard.
Yeah.
Is that she just thought he was an asshole on the set of the Crucible?
Well, and I think this is going to be something that we're going to have to start sprinkling into our future episode conversations, is that more and more word of Winona's difficulty comes into the fray. Now, I know that's because of external and different factors that we'll definitely talk about.
Yeah.
But it
This
is
is a
something
big
that-
one for this movie.
It's something that should be acknowledged, that maybe not currently right now in this time period, but especially when we get to the late 90s, early 2000s.
that's kind of why-
more press about Winona. I hate to say not like diva-ness, but just like she can be difficult to work with.
Yeah.
that will start coming.
It'll be a
into-
big thing we address.
Which you always want to kind of take with a grain of salt.
Absolutely.
When it comes to a woman.
Absolutely.
But certainly as part of her
The
narrative.
narrative.
And I think this is when it started to kick its heels up because of the Godfather thing.
Yeah.
And the Godfather thing into this.
Yeah.
And then
And like she had to, and saying when she went to Coppola and was like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I had to leave this movie because I had a full like mental like breakdown, like having to apologize for
how
that."
old is she?
She's like 20.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
Yeah.
thing. You got to remember,
Yeah.
she's so young.
And she's been doing movies since she was like 14.
I know.
Like, so yeah. Like,
The final thing I want to say about this Dracula is that it's such an iconic look
oh my God.
that
yeah.
the parody of it has itself
Yes, that's what I'm
become
saying.
an iconic look.
I think you were also gone when I was talking about this, but like I just feel like so much of this movie is iconic into the parodies of that Simpsons parody of it
Yeah.
also being like one of the more well-regarded Simpsons episodes.
It's an incredible Trios of Horror episode. I'm a huge Trios of Horror guy.
I don't even think it's one of the better regarded Trios of Horrors. I think that is one of the better regarded episodes of
in
the
general.
show, period.
and while we're in this chapter of the movie, and there's the other thing that I feel like we have to really like talk about, because the entire movie has phenomenal in-camera practical like effects and stuff, but you have to agree that where it is so concentrated is when he's in the castle.
Yes, because that's the Dracula space, right? That's the tension of it, right? Is that like you were saying, Descendant to Hell, right? Transylvania is the hell space.
Yeah.
London is pure, and then when the action moves to London, it becomes this like
Weird mix.
tension,
Yeah.
weird mix of the two things,
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think, I don't know if it was Coppola or somebody who said in an interview that like, it's like Dracula's castle alters physics.
Yes.
And that's where you get the shadows. The rat
running
on the
on the
ceiling,
ceiling. Great
the
shot.
water dripping up, the shadows not quite matching.
The brides like fuse together into one creature.
Right. Like all these kind of things happening that just really, that's why I said I could have taken a 3-hour
Oh yeah.
drug trip, like 2001 Odyssey Aronofsky-esque like drug trip of a Dracula's
Which I'm
Castle
surprised no one's done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe they have and I missed it, but like
Maybe.
it does feel like more of a layup than doing just the Demeter stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's why I'm really sad that Demeter was actually bad, because like that's I'd be like,
It's a layup.
It's a good layup. Yeah, like of course, like no one's ever talked about Dracula sailing to London and like what happened on that fucking ship.
It's Alien on a boat.
It's Alien on a boat.
How do you fuck that up?
Yeah. So, but to that point, Cole, like I agree, someone should do just like a
Yeah,
concentrated
I would be-
horror
I mean,
movie in a Dracula castle.
I'm sure
I'd see
someone
it.
has. There's been a lot of Dracula movies.
And the other big thing to talk about with this is the costume itself and
God.
Iko Ishioka.
Maybe the most deserving Oscar win in any
Yes.
category ever.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Who did she beat? Do you have that up here?
I can pull it up. It's the
1993 Oscars
93.
for
Yeah,
costume.
Because
I
I
got it,
know there was some like fear that it might be like too genre or too weird to win. Like when the Oscars
she tops Enchanted April,
Okay.
Howard's End, Malcolm X, and Toys.
So two of those one of those is a Best Picture nominee. Like three of those are like acting nominees, right?
Yeah.
Like, and Toys is Toys.
This is a very well deserved.
Yeah, but like Malcolm X, Enchanted April, Howard's End.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Enchanted April, but like those are like what you'd expect to win this Oscar, and that they are like very high scale period pictures.
And the thing that's cool
the
about
costumes of Malcolm X are really good.
I am seeing Malcolm X for the first time next week.
That's insane.
The thing.
Then we're going right into Argyle. You're
Yeah.
gonna lose your mind.
The thing about Iko Ishioka is that she has like a very interesting career where she's not really a film person.
Yeah.
She does movies. She did this Mishima. She gets another Oscar nomination for Mirror Mirror.
Great costumes. That movie looks great costume.
She also does Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark.
Yep.
Which has to
Yep.
some.
Bad
But just
costumes, to be clear.
weird. One
I don't
day
like it.
someone
I
will do
don't-
a 20 episode podcast about Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. Anyway, so he starts getting seduced into Dracula's castle. Dracula buys the land, all the Carfax Abbey.
Yeah.
Carfax Abbey in London, completing his purchase of like 12 different properties. He insists that Harker stay for another month after he sees a picture of Mina and has a very emotional reaction to it because he realizes that Elisabetta has returned.
It's an Moon.
It's the Anxuna Moon
style
thing from the Mummy. Very similar ideas.
Do you like that? Do you like that,
I did
Paul?
like that.
The Mummy is a perfectly fine movie.
Oh yeah. No, I did you clock that right away with the whole like? Because I was like,
It feels like a Universal Monsters thing that they've.
Yeah,
I mean, even though it is the original text, but
reincarnated.
You are
love.
right. I am sorry. I said like there is probably some version of Dracula that has done this before, but in fact, I do think the origin of this is the Boris Karloff Mummy.
yeah,
Because that is a plot point in the
Boris Karloff.
original Universal Monster Mummy movie.
Yeah.
Is that there's some like reincarnated love stuff going on.
Gotcha.
I
Yeah.
believe. That movie's not very good. But
Right.
I'll watch it. eventually.
Karloff's incredible in it.
When's he bad?
Never, but that might be his best performance.
So Jonathan is, convinced to stay for another month. He starts quickly figuring out that there's perhaps vampiric activities happening in this castle when he sees Dracula climbing on the walls.
And see this again. This is where the interesting, boring character would have elevated this whole thing even more.
You keep talking like you're trying to win an argument with me.
No. I'm aiming this at Jeff. I'm aiming this at Jeff.
I like what he's doing. I like that he's just dundering around. Being like, oh my God, there's a vampire.
If it's 1992, who are we casting?
Richard E. Grant.
Yeah,
We're
I
just
really,
gonna-
I
we're just
really
gonna
did
cast
fucking nail it, didn't I?
Yeah.
Who plays I in With Nail and I? Hold on. Keep talking.
So we eventually Jonathan is seduced by
The Brides of Dracula.
the brides of Dracula, and is left essentially to be fed upon by them, while Dracula makes his escape to London.
Can I just quickly say?
Yeah.
Would. Yeah, I would just stay there. I would let them eat me. 100%.
Dracula sails to England aboard the Demeter to London.
Yep. And it's like rebirthed as a younger man in a very cool shot, and then also turns into a werewolf.
And he brings the storm with him to London.
Yes.
The werewolf stuff is very cool.
Yes.
He I like that every time you played a clip, it's the exact same.
The score is good in
It's
this
so good.
movie. The Annie Lennox song, maybe not
A
so
little
much.
iffy.
It's a little iffy.
Yeah.
They bury it a little deep in the credits too. They know.
I like that he gets to London and immediately just runs right to Mina.
No,
and
he
his
runs
Dracula.
to Lucy.
Yeah, he goes to Lucy first.
Well, doesn't he think Mina's there? Isn't that the idea?
It's unclear because it's also unclear in the book why he's like going straight for them.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where you're like, well, it's just what happens.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of zoning past the internal logic of it because it's just how the story needs to go. We haven't talked about Lucy though.
We haven't talked about Lucy, who's
Lucy.
Mina's best friend. We haven't really talked about Mina yet.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's true.
But he bites Lucy.
As a werewolf.
Well, first he fucks her.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the thing isn't the first one, certainly not going to be the last one, and probably also predated, and not just Bram Stoker, but before Bram Stoker, the sexualized nature of vampires.
Yes.
That drinking somebody's blood. And again, you talked about something very interesting, that like vampires are kind of more of this metaphorical allegory for unclean Eastern European infiltrating and corrupting the West.
Yeah.
And not only in like
They're gonna come over and rape the women.
exactly.
Right? Like, that's literally what Dracula does.
Yeah, and so that's where it's like that fundamental sort of basis of that, I think this movie really captures in a way that it's not just young Gary Oldman in a, I won't even say he's having sex with her, but he's at least like in like a penetrative like pose where it looks like
he's having sex with her. She's fucking a wolf.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But that's my ultimate point. My ultimate point is like it would have been one thing if he's like in his regular vampire form. But it's not. It's the fact that he's in the grotesque werewolf form.
I think so.
It means something extra on top of it that he's in his werewolf form doing that.
And I think part of what's interesting about this movie in particular is this relationship to the sexuality, because there's the sense in the book, because you've got these two women and Mina is like purely devoted to the one suitor, whereas Lucy is like
She's got like 3.
flitting her way through 3 best friends,
Yes.
right? Which is also a plot point in the novel. But I think what this movie, like, not so much makes explicit as kind of just recapitulates this, because I don't think it's the subtext in the novel that Lucy is just fucking all these guys.
Yeah.
Right? But clearly in this one, I think the idea is that Lucy just wants to get laid, and all these guys are too much like Victorian gentlemen to fuck her.
Yeah.
And so she wants to get fucked by somebody, and Dracula will fuck her. And it's so like, that desire is so intense. Like, you know, they're looking at that pornography earlier, and there's that like very explicit idea of this pornography they're looking at, that it is like bestial. Right. And like, but that's her desire, right? It's this pure base thing. So I don't even think she necessarily wants to fuck like sexy human Dracula. She wants to get ravaged by a beast.
Yeah.
Right? She wants to be violated. That's she in this movie is so much more a like willing and desiring participant in the vampirism, because I think it's sating the sexual desire in her that
this brings up
no one else will give her.
a good Winona quote about this movie from the biography. Is that she, when asked like what attracted her to the script, and she said first that she was attracted to it being an emotional love story.
Yes.
But also that Mina, you know, I'll just read the exact quote. Mina, like many women in the late 1800s, has a lot of repressed sexuality.
Yes.
Everything about women in that area, the way that corsets forced them to move, was indicative of repression. To express passion was freakish. And that's what she and Coppola both like kind of zoomed in on. Is this is a movie about the repression of sexuality and the way that explodes when, you know, after being forced down for so long.
So there's this thing I read in that David J. Scull book, where he says that, which I thought was very interesting, where he says that like in the novel Dracula, Mina is like intended to be read as a more like forward-thinking, almost proto-feminist figure, whereas Lucy is like the perfect model of a Victorian gentlewoman, right? But I think reading that book now, with just how cultural mores have changed, I think oftentimes people think of Mina as the more like traditional woman, because she's so just like this, like cleanly devoted to her. Not, I think the reason why she's like meant to be read as more independent woman is because she's not trying to marry up in the book, that she's like marrying for love, not for money. But I think now we see like Lucy as this woman who's like, you know, choosing between multiple men and never feeling like super devoted to one of them. And she reads almost as the more modern figure. And I think that this movie then, that what, in making Mina the protagonist, I think they very wisely make it a story of Mina's sexual awakening, down to there being no resolution to the like cracks that are formed in the relationship between her and Jonathan over the end. That it is ultimately about this deeply repressed desire that she has to be sort of like coaxed into admitting to herself. Whereas Lucy is like, is that a werewolf? Get fucking nutting me right now, dude. Right? Like,
well, that's a great transition to where I kind of want to get into, which is Gary Oldman, Dracula, seducing Mina, like the introduction and all that stuff, because
which she needs to be seduced. Lucy does not need to be seduced, right? Lucy is there,
right?
Because if we're talking about like Jonathan as like the ultimate cuck, it is like very telling that she's just like sitting around like, God, he's just not coming back. He's just staying in Transylvania. What's going on?
Who plays Lucy? I'm blanking on her name because she's
Lucy.
This is probably her highest I mean, she's
Sadie Frost.
Sadie Frost. Obviously, Sadie Frost worked a lot in like England after this. Was briefly married to Jude Law. I just do think this is probably her highest profile.
Yeah, this is her
I think
highest
she's
profile performance.
fucking like, you do watch this, you're like, why was she not a huge star?
Yeah,
because
fantastic.
Every scene, you're just like, she's just like jolts of energy into this movie.
Yeah.
So Dracula kind of he posts up in Carfax Abbey.
Yep.
And he begins, you know, his seduction of Mina, who's initially very resistant to him.
Very resistant. Like from the sight of him on the street when he asked her for directions, she's like, go fuck yourself.
And I love the idea that this movie in the original Browning Dracula, and I'm sure the novel, the idea when Dracula gets to London is like he's just like this kind of specter that's floating through his terror. I like that this movie kind of like he's out of time. He's a bit out of touch when he's there.
He wants to go to the movies.
Yeah, he wants to go to the movies. He's like, I want to see all these modern marvels.
Yeah.
And like Coppola uses those like vintage cameras and like the different frame rates of the like candid photography and just kind of creates this little section of the movie that's just all about like the way that time works on culture and trying to re-enter this world 300 years later after those oceans of time he's talking about. How difficult that would be for this guy. Not to like have sympathy for Dracula, but I think the movie wants you to have sympathy for Dracula.
If there's like the one like leap I think this movie needs to take to like fully like I do think this is a great movie, but it's just a great movie just because it's just so sumptuous and just beautiful. But like on a screenplay level, there is I think a tension between that interpretation of Dracula and this interpretation of Mina and the relationship and the much more faithful like let's hit all the plot beats of the novel stuff that script never even tries to reconcile and I don't necessarily know that Coppola is able to reconcile these two disparate halves beyond just ending it very bluntly, which is a smart move, but
that it has to do like some of the Dracula beats.
Yeah,
like
which
Mina
are the most
going to get
boring-
married in Romania.
most boring parts of the movie are the like the Scooby Gangs getting together.
Yeah.
the Scooby Gang kind of sucks in this movie. As much as I love them as performers.
Yeah. Like Hopkins is great as Van Helsing.
But Hopkins is great because he gets the like high camp of the whole text and is just leaning just fully leaning into the joke of it all.
Yeah.
And because he's just the best.
But the movie almost kind of, you almost don't need Van Helsing in this interpretation of Dracula.
Don't need Van Helsing in this interpretation of Dracula. He's superfluous.
Yeah, I agree.
Like like you were saying, like there's the two competing ideas.
Yeah.
And I understand the impetus to have like a Van Helsing character to kill, like you need someone who's going to kill Dracula. But if you're just going to make a romance story and it has to end with Dracula's death, you can just cut out the other guys and just have Jonathan do it.
You definitely don't need Quincy and Seward.
Yeah.
Or I guess you need Seward. You don't need Quincy and Arthur, right? You can kind of collapse all three of Lucy's paramours into one guy because so much of the function of the two who aren't Seward is kind of irrelevant in a movie that is somewhat disinterested in the vampire hunting that takes up much of the back half of the novel.
Yeah.
Right. They're only they serve a function there to emphasize the idea of the Lucy having three suitors.
Yeah.
Is important to this movie. The three suitors also being best friends like is not important to this movie the way it is important to the novel because those characters matter more in the novel beyond their relationship to Lucy than they does. Like, why is Cary Elwes in this movie? Like Arthur is such an unnecessary character in this film because the only one who matters to the plot of the film is Stuart. And the other two guys are just there because they're in the novel.
Yeah, if you collapse all of them into Seward, how even collapse Van Helsing into Seward. Yeah, because there's the whole bit.
And Grant, no one talks about how good Richard E. Grant in this movie, but
because there's the whole thing where he's like, I'm gonna call my professor, Dr. Van Helsing, to come and help. You could just have him.
You
know
could
the
just
knowledge. It's a very clean.
That's just what happens in the book, right?
Yeah.
Like that, you're hitting these beats because this is ostensibly the faithful adaptation, even though it's not a faithful adaptation, which is the crazy thing about this movie.
But even all that said, like Hopkins, and they're all so much fun in the movie that you really don't mind.
Elwes,
he's doing his thing.
The problem is that I don't necessarily like his thing as a star persona. And I do feel like this is where you're starting to enshrine it because it really does feel like Cary Elwes only ever played creeps and cucks. And I don't know that that's actually what he was good at because he should have been like a dashing leading man.
Yeah.
Right. Like they briefly tried to make him a dashing leading man. And then somehow he just like collapsed into playing creeps and cucks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say what movie it is because it's a spoiler, but there is a movie from the 90s that is a murder mystery. And I watched it and the opening credits come up and, you know, it's the 90s, right? So there's no movie before the opening credits. I'm watching this movie. You press play, studio logos, then we're in an opening credit sequence. And Cary Elwes' name popped up in the opening credits. No idea about the plot of this movie beyond the fact that it was a murder mystery. I'm like, there's the killer. And you'll never guess who the killer is in this movie.
Cary Elwes.
It's Cary Elwes. The man played Robin Hood. I know it was a parody, but he played Robin Hood and he played Wesley in The Princess Bride, right? And he's great at doing those. And for some reason, I think because he's just so next level handsome, they're like, no, you're the fucking Baxter in a Jim Carrey movie. You're the guy who's getting cucked in Dracula by Dracula.
Yeah.
You know, you're playing like skeevy rapists in mid-level thrillers. Like, no, this guy is like a much better at being a straightforward leading man than he is at doing this character actor shit.
Yeah.
Because even this past year in Mission Impossible, he's just playing like the creepy NSA head of the NSA.
He's good in that movie. I saw someone say the other day that he looks like he looks like a young actor who's been digitally aged. And I think that's very on point.
Wow. It looks unsettling.
He does look unsettling.
That movie gives him some unforgivable dialogue that he excels with.
As someone who is a bit of a Mission Impossible 7 hater, Elwes' big scene in the climax where he like explains the plot of the movie is one of the better scenes in that movie.
Yeah. If you give that to any other actor though.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare.
Well, it is what McQuarrie said about casting what's his face in Fallout. Who is it? Who plays Michelle Monaghan's husband in Fallout? I'm blanking on his name.
I know
the guy
Wes Bentley.
Wes Bentley. That Wes Bentley plays like a character who is probably below his star persona for 2 seconds in Fallout. And McQuarrie said, like, yes, I'm aware it's distracting, but you also like need an actor who can handle the weight of that scene.
Yeah.
Like Elwes is the same thing.
Stuart, have you seen Mission Impossible 7 yet?
No.
The end of the movie, Cary Elwes gets this one scene where he's in like a train car.
He walks into the movie. He just explains the plot.
He has to explain the entire plot of the movie. And then not only that, he has to explain what happened prior to the movie to a character while also explaining it to the audience to catch you up on everything that has happened off screen through the whole movie. It's like maybe it has potential to derail.
Yeah,
it's funny.
it should be a disaster.
It could derail the entire movie. But he's having so much fun just being like, the Sevastopol. It's aboard the submarine. And then the camera's like kind of tilting at an angle and he's tilting his head with it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's a fun
That's
scene.
really good.
Anyway, so Dracula and Mina have their relationship. Do we want to dive into Winona in this movie?
Yeah.
That's what this podcast is about.
So, because I think that we should deeply address the Winona of it all.
So I alluded to this earlier, but while it has not had the like long tail of the Keanu is bad in this movie and stuff, there was some consternation about her performance and her casting. And I do wonder if Age of Innocence kind of killed that because to some degree
she gets the nomination.
She's also really good in the Age of Innocence. To some degree, the like anti-Winona stuff in this, I just feels like reflexive, like this is such a Gen X icon.
Yes.
She doesn't belong in period pieces. And I do think she disabuses us of that notion very quickly because she does Age of Innocence and then Little Women.
Yeah, and
so quickly.
House of the Spirits, apparently.
Yeah, but because she does Age of Innocence and Little Women.
Because she makes the very deliberate choice that she's like, I don't want to get stuck in this persona.
Yes.
I'm going to just do the direct opposite. Which is so smart as a performer, even though it opens you up to some blowback at the beginning of it.
It does, and it doesn't really pay off for her long run.
Yeah.
Like you'd expect.
She gets 2 Oscar nominations.
Well, but I am saying that like in a just world, this is like the level up moment.
Yeah.
This, not just literally this movie, but this like run is like the level up moment that like leads to a long and fruitful career as a serious actress.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like 10 years later, that experiment has run its course for her, which is a bit of a bummer. Because I think she's extraordinary in this.
Yes.
I think that she gives the best performance.
She's so good
in this movie. And she holds down a lot of complex like tensions and like sexual negotiations that allows other performers to like ham it up in a fun way.
Obviously Oldman is like the star of the movie.
But that's such a sexy performance on the page.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. And she has the unsexy, the unappealing work of making the plot of the movie work.
I talk about this a lot in my own podcast, but that like when Colin Farrell is at his best, it's almost that he's taking the underwritten character on the page and like fleshing it out so his co-stars can have more fun with the better written characters on the page.
And that's very much what she's doing in this movie.
I did want to ask, because you guys have watched all of them up to this. Has she ever been so sexual on screen? Because that the horniness and the eroticism of this performance, which I think she really, really lands. It feels so contrary to the Winona star persona in toto, right? Not just of the younger period, but like through the 90s, right?
Well, the interesting thing about it is the only time she's ever touched anything like this, I mean, there's Heathers, which has sex in it.
But she's not the sexy one.
She's not the sexy one, but she has a few sex scenes in that movie.
but she's like a desexualized character.
And then in Edward Scissorhands, there's a big moment where she takes her shirt off. But it's like it's not. It's like Edward's laying in the bed and she comes in the room and takes her shirt off, and that's like the first time she's done that.
I do not remember
in a movie.
I do not remember that in that movie.
It really you wouldn't remember.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just.
But then she makes the deliberate choice of saying that she wanted, to be respected seriously, and that she wanted to do this role that plays so much in sex.
Oh yeah,
she did have the rule that she would not do nudity in the movie.
Sure. It doesn't.
Yeah, which it doesn't require.
I am often very irritated by actors not doing nudity in movies that I think call for nudity, male and female, right? And like both for prurient reasons and just for like I think movies are more interesting if there's just nudity in them in general. It's one of the things I love about Jane Campion, that there's just so much casual nudity in all her movies and like realistic nudity in the way other movies shy away from. This performance is more interesting for her not being naked in it, because it's about that like edging up to the cusp of surrender that she's never fully willing to give herself over to.
Stuart walked in right in the middle of that one. That was funny.
Yeah, I did.
But I just think the idea of Winona Ryder as a screen performer is this like anorak girl next door who, even when she's a romantic lead, is almost too like interesting to be a sexual creature on screen, right? That she's the intellectual's ingenue, right? And to be the intellectual's ingenue means that you're not sexy in a movie, because sexy is dumb, which is a stupid dichotomy, but it's how
movies
think
worked,
about these
it's how
things,
a lot of
right?
her early movies work.
It's why like no one takes Sydney Sweeney interesting as someone who conceives of her own projects, right?
Yeah.
Because she's such a sexual object, even though she does think about these things much more than I think people tend to.
She's a very intelligent performer who just got saddled with a like Valley Girl accent.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just think Winona's magnetic in this thing. And you watch it and you're like, well, this is why she burned so bright for this period. And especially have you guys watched have you seen Age of Innocence?
I have not seen Age of Innocence.
Yeah. It is so crazy that these two are back to back, because because the time periods are the same, but what she's doing is so different in the Age of Innocence.
Stuart, how do you feel about Winona in this movie? We're both very positive.
I'm also very positive.
Yeah.
You guys were kind of alluding. I just stepped back in, but you guys are alluding to like her edging up to the sexualness of her character, but not quite giving it. I kind of found that also to be 100% true.
I mean,
Football game.
She does have that one scene where she like implicitly blows Gary Oldman. But even then it's like it's artful, right? It's not graphic in the way that we have in this movie seen a woman get ravaged by a dog.
Yes.
Right? Like that this I was having the thought, not to be crass, but like, they do look at pornography in this movie. Yeah. Drawn pornography, and it's doggy style sex. And Mina is kind of baffled by the idea that anyone could have sex in that position.
Yeah, because she's like, how do men and women even do that?
Yeah. And I was thinking about how like you kind of leave something on the table by not having the wolf sex be Doggy Style.
Yeah.
But then it was
Yeah.
like, I truly think in 1992, like that would get them an NC-17.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Well,
they're pushing that there is bestiality in this movie on screen.
Yeah.
Even if it's an actor in a suit.
Yeah.
Like that is probably like the very limits. But just that this movie has gotten that graphic, and then the Dracula Mina implicit sex scene where she drinks his blood is so like withdrawn and pulled back and used from suggestion, is I think by design vis-a-vis how much we're going to sexualize Mina.
Well, and there was even talks that when this movie was getting preview screenings, and the wording's different, but I have a hunch about something that the audience commented that it's too gory. That they dialed back
This
the
movie's
gore.
very gory.
Well, I have a hunch that I'm guessing it wasn't just blood and guts that the
Yes.
audience. I'm guessing they pulled back a lot of the sexualness of it.
It's pretty.
It's not explicitly stated in like IMDb or probably Wikipedia that the sexualness got dialed back, but I just have a hunch that it did. I'm guessing that there was a lot more sexualness in this movie that
Explicit sexuality.
that wasn't put on screen.
This movie is, I would say, very graphic for a big studio Oscar play. That is both in terms of the blood, because it does have this like, splatter energy to a lot of the gore.
Yeah.
Like feels like something out of a Sam Raimi movie or Peter Jackson movie or like a DTV slasher film.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Everyone gets killed in despicable ways.
But there's also like Lucy puking the blood onto Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
Right? That's like a gag shot. But I think also the sex, both like, because we have to remember that when we're talking about like sex in Hollywood movies, and especially in this period, it is not just what we think of as literal graphicness, which is like nudity and explicit positions. It is also like content. That this is a movie that has group sex and bestiality in it that is depicted on screen in unambiguous fashion. Right? That like, this is stuff that you're not seeing in other movies of this scale in the early 90s, where movies that I think are far less visibly graphic, but much more like conceptually sexual, are getting hit with this NC-17, unfortunately, death knell. Right. And I do have to wonder to what degree is this movie dodging the NC-17, because it's a Coppola movie with huge stars in it.
Yeah.
And it even has like, there's so much of the, we don't really have the time to get too much into it, but there's all the HIV subtext of the concept of vampirism as this essentially sexually transmitted disease.
Which is obviously something that people do start doing.
It's been done a lot.
The second they clock that AIDS is a bloodborne condition, right? Like everyone starts running to the vampire
analogy.
But you know what? It's because it lands, right?
Yeah.
And it works for this. It's the civilization line from Van Helsing.
Yeah.
It's probably his best line in the movie.
He's just so fucking funny in this movie. And it's such a great idea to have Van Helsing not be the like stodgy genius who comes in and is like, let me give you exposition, but instead this like wacky comedic relief.
No, Anthony Hopkins knew the assignment to a T.
Supernatural being too. I mean, I was just talking about Hopkins on my show, but like a thing you have to remember about Anthony Hopkins is that The Silence of the Lambs is 25 years into his career.
Yeah.
Right? His first big movie is The Lion in Winter, which is a Peter O'Toole, Katharine Hepburn movie from the 60s. That he's like, but then he's like a lead in, right?
Yeah.
Like Anthony Hopkins is someone who like gets decades to like get his level of craft down before he blows up. And then when he blows up, he is just like the pro of pros.
Yeah.
I think a lot about Ian McKellen hosted SNL once, and he gave in his opening monologue, he's talking about back when I was in the theater course with Anthony Hopkins and Dame Maggie Smith.
Yes.
And now
Hopkins is this, McKellen is a similar beast, right?
And he's saying, now I'm an action figure. He's known for eating people's faces, and she's the Harry Potter lady. And then, the audience laughed.
Yeah.
Do we think he's going to get an Oscar before he dies, McKellen?
I
think he's
he's going to get nominated for Deadpool 3, obviously.
Is he in that?
Everyone's going to be in
No.
Ben Affleck's going to be in that movie. I should actually say, it's funny I said Maggie Smith. Winona's biggest inspiration for this movie was she watched period Maggie Smith movies, and that's how she worked on the accent and the pose, or the poise.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you've seen younger Maggie, yeah.
How quick can I speedrun the rest of this movie plot-wise?
It's Dracula.
Wait.
Everyone knows what happens in Dracula.
They all get together. Mina gets kidnapped by Dracula and bitten. She and Van Helsing go to Dracula's castle where they hope to lure Dracula into a final confrontation. The brides are killed. One of the three men dies. I am forgetting which one because they're kind of interchangeable.
Quincy the Texan.
Quincy the Texan dies. Then they stab Van Helsing or Dracula with a Bowie knife through his heart. He starts dying. He brings Mina into his castle, where Van Helsing and Jonathan Harker agree that Mina will have to finish this.
Which is the big last diversion point from the novel.
This is also
because but what you're also skipping over is that, you know, in the book, Dracula starts feeding on Mina to basically as like a threat to Harker to be like, you're going after me, I'm going to take the thing you love.
Yeah.
But in this one, there's this idea that like, no, Dracula is in love with Mina and Mina is in love with Dracula, right? That like she is settling for Jonathan because he's a good Victorian man.
Yeah.
And she thinks it's like interesting to not marry up. But she meets this guy and she is in love with him. So while they're trying to hunt down Dracula, she is like consumed with this guilt that she's aiding the people who are trying to kill her loved one, but also that he's a monster.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But she willingly, like, there's that great moment where he's trying to turn her into a vampire and he is like,
I don't want to
I love you. I don't want to do this to you. And she's like, no, do it to me. Take me from this death. Right?
And it's interesting how like the transformation of a vampire in this movie, which if you tell me if it's like within the novel that it's like you have to drink the vampire's
I can't
blood.
remember if it's in the novel, but certainly I would say much vampire fiction traditionally has done that.
Okay.
That idea that it's the consummation, the mixing of fluids.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's how it is in I think the Anne Rice stuff, that's how it is in Buffy, like stuff that's a little more quick and dirty and wants the more zombie energy has
just as the bite.
Just the bite, but I think most vampire stuff has this idea of like that you're fucking, right? That like that like it's give and take.
Yeah.
So Mina and Dracula have this essentially romantic farewell inside.
It's very like Cyrano de Bergerac in a weird way.
It's lovely.
It's lovely.
And like the crucifix is restored and, you know, she is added to the mural above him.
And she's not killing him. She's saving him.
She's releasing him.
She's releasing him back to heaven, right? Like he's repented.
So this is where I want to talk about George Lucas real quick.
Okay.
Because Coppola showed his best friend, or one of his best friends, George Lucas, the movie. They get to the scene and Dracula just kind of like dies. He just dies. And George's like, that's not how vampires are killed.
Yep. He's right.
And he's like,
He's
what?
right. He's right.
And he's like, vampires, they cut their heads off.
You got to cut their heads off.
And Scope's like, are you fucking serious?
He's
and,
right.
And George
He's
is
so
like,
right.
you already did it in the movie.
It's
so
so
Coppola had to go back and reshoot the end of this movie.
But it's so much
because
better.
George Lucas is like, gotta cut the head off.
It is one thing for him to die in her arms. It is another thing
for her to
them
kill him.
to have this like last moment, and then for her to mutilate his body as like the ultimate act of love.
Yeah.
Right? That it ends with her slicing his head off and then just like looking into the sky.
Yeah. And
Roll
Elizabeth and
fucking
Dracula are
credits.
united.
They're in there, and then bam, roll fucking credits.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful
It's
ending.
a good ending. It's a really good
I like
ending.
to think that George remembered this moment when he had Count Dooku's head get cut off in Revenge of the Sith. So he's just like, gotta cut that off.
Count Dooku's head get cut off. Oh, yeah, it is in that one. Yeah, I was thinking of Jango Fett's head getting cut off.
You know what I think about a lot? This is random divergence.
Star Wars?
No, I think about how Christopher Lee came back in like two major blockbuster franchises in the early 2000s, and then only appears in the first scene of the third one where he gets his murdered immediately. And in one of them, he wasn't even in the theatrical
Yeah,
release.
he gets cut out.
He gets literally cut out.
Every time someone tells me that they should have put the Sky and the Sire stuff in Return of the King, I want to like wedge.
It would have been such a terrible
been
idea.
a disaster.
Disastrous.
The what in the
Have you read that novel,
I just didn't hear what you said.
The Skyring of the Shire?
Oh,
Like
okay.
the massive third act at the end of
Yeah.
the last book, which is fine in a book.
The movie already has like 5 endings to it.
Yeah.
Don't tell Mark we said that.
Is he a Scouring the Shire truther?
No, he hates it when people talk about that movie having too many endings.
Okay.
It drives him crazy.
The Scouring of the Shire. Look, one of my favorite movies of all time, and I admit it has too many.
Let's call him.
You want to get?
I'll call him.
Oh god.
All right. Stuart, what is like hard for you? Do you have 5
Now.
more minutes? Okay, you have 5 more minutes.
Fine. I have a 20-minute drive home and a 15-minute pack up.
Okay.
Where are you going?
Home.
Okay.
Like literally home. Okay.
Um,
Jeff can do his
Mark,
laundry while we
quick-
record. I
real,
can't.
Real quick question. real quick question.
I'm trapped, Mark.
Do you think they should have put the Scouring of the Shire in The Return of the King? No. Okay, interesting. Do you think it has too many endings? No. Okay, bye.
okay, good.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's quick final thoughts.
Great
Bram
movie.
Stoker's Dracula.
Great movie. Love it.
Incredible movie.
Masterpiece, but like a masterpiece of like just sheer texture.
Stuart, how long have we been going for?
2 hours 20 minutes.
Hell yeah. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
It just feels so good.
Yes.
Right. It's not like I was actually like worried that I was like, what do we even talk about with this movie? Because it's just the sensation of watching the thing is the potency. As an adaptation, it's a mess. Ideologically, I think it's a little incoherent. Like even narratively, it is often like for large stretches very boring. But I just love the sense of it all.
I think that this is one of our most wide-ranging episodes in terms of conversation.
Well, that's because I'm on it.
And no, and it's not just because I think that this movie, I think it's just this movie lends itself to us having this kind of more freely talking about a lot of topics.
Yeah.
Whether it's Keanu or whether it's the HIV parallel or whether it's just the art of adaptation in general. We've touched on a lot of things this episode, and I think that it takes a movie like a special movie like this to spawn that conversation.
Yeah. But
that
listeners, if you've never seen this, you really
go home and watch.
No talking about this movie supersedes the movie itself because it is just such a sensual pleasure.
I think this is my second favorite movie we've ever talked about. I think it's behind Blowout. I would say that.
Wow.
I mean, I do think that's probably correct.
I can't decide right now.
Yeah.
I have
I
to.
would-
I have to let it digest.
What else is even up there?
I love Killers of the Flower Moon, but it's too
Good.
soon for me to say
Quite
that.
good, but
It's too soon for me to say that.
But Darkly Noon is better.
Darkly Noon is pretty good though.
It's pretty good.
It's brilliant.
Anyone else have any final things to say about this movie before I start closing us out? Box office hit.
Yep.
Makes $250
But
million.
had a pretty sharp drop off, I think. It didn't it open really strong and
It makes $215 off a 40 budget.
yeah.
I
I might be wrong.
I am struggling to find. It had a 50% week drop.
Oh, it's actually
not terrible.
That's not bad.
It beat the opening weekend record in the UK
Yes.
that was set by Batman Returns.
This is
Gets-
a much better movie.
Gets nominated for 4 Oscars, wins 3 for costume design, makeup, and sound editing. Loses art direction insanely.
Not in picture, but I just think it's that's asking for too much.
I would have probably nominated.
This is a bad Best Picture field.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm of the opinion.
Malcolm X doesn't even get nominated.
Well, they weren't doing that. They were not nominating the Spike Lee movies when Spike Lee's making the best movies ever made, like on an annual basis, is the problem. Look, the Best Picture field this year is mostly movies that are pretty good.
Yes.
But none of them are better than pretty good. And I do think that is actually a rarity for Best Picture lineups.
So that's this movie redefines vampire movies, some of which we'll probably talk about in the future of the show.
Probably.
All right, but that's all I have to say about Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'll start leading us out.
Who's that?
I think you got to open the door, Stuart.
No, just ignore it.
Hello. Can I come in?
Where's the off switch?
Can I come in?
It's right
Can we
here.
just
Can
kill
I
his
come
mic
in?
specifically?
I know.
I'm trapped outside the door. You got to let me in. It's raining.
You know, can
All
I
right.
just say my biggest
I
bugbear?
guess I'm not allowed to come into the house. I'm trapped outside here on the stoop.
All right.
How long can you just
all
keep-
right.
Don't- no,
Come
let
on
us keep
in.
loud.
and-
No.
Oh, thank you. I've been
no.
invited inside. Oh, I'd like to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Travolting Presents Easy Riders, covering Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Shouldn't it just be Easy Rider? I don't know.
Tune in next week for our episode on The Age of Innocence, joined by Mark Tilly.
Can I just say one thing?
You dare insult the Lord of Darkness by trying to cut him off.
Can I just ask you two one question about Age of Innocence?
Blah,
and
blah,
Dracula, you can weigh in on this too.
Yes.
I know you haven't watched it yet. But
I have not seen the movie.
When you two watch it, can you just get back to me and tell me if Winona Ryder is playing the Dark Lord Satan himself in that movie? Because I can't make up my mind.
I'm best friends with the Dark Lord Satan, and I'll let you know.
Can you check in, Count?
I'll check in for you. Continue. Make sure to please remember to rate,
Stuart,
a review, and to subscribe on whatever
behavior.
platform you're listening on. As a reminder, Travolting is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast, which does not exist anymore. Much like me, it is the undead. We're also on YouTube. You can pop it to our Reddit, r/Travolting, at Travolting Pod on Twitter or Instagram, and the BlueSky and Threads at Jeff W. Sweeney on Twitter. Anything you would like to plug?
Yeah, you should listen to Above the Title, which is my podcast, which is about the career of Colin Farrell. Is this still dropping on the 7th?
This will be dropping on February.
Wow,
7th.
Dracula, how did you know that?
I can see time and space in memoriam.
Yeah, listeners, if you're listening to this the week it comes out, in 2 days, Jeff is going to be on my show talking about a very normal movie, Saving Mr. Banks, in a very normal podcast recording.
It is true. My thrall, Jeff Sweeney, will be on the show. It definitely
wasn't 4 hours long.
We didn't talk.
But yeah, listen to my show. It's a good show.
It's a great show. I've listened to every episode. I've also listened to every episode, Drac. It's fascinating. So finally, special thanks to Rebecca Sweeney for our graphic design and Michael Van Boldingham Smith for the theme music. Now I have come to suck your blood. Ah!
The internal logic of Dracula's relationship to the show doesn't
I am
make
sucking
sense.
your blood.
Yeah.